First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to our August 7th San Francisco Airport Community Noise Abatement Roundtable for San Mateo County. And welcome back James Castaneda, our coordinator. We missed him a couple months ago, but Supervisor Pine's legislative aide, Linda Wolin, who just walked in, she performed all the other duties marvelously. So thank you so much, Linda, for jumping in and helping out. So I'll ask James to call us to order and do the roll call, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for those words. City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors. City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Here, Doug Yakel.
San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. CCAG Airport Land Use Commission.
Carol Ford.
Town of Atherton.
Elizabeth Lewis.
City of Belmont.
She's on her way. Julia
Got
is
it.
on her
And
way.
she did confirm she would be here, as well as Supervisor Pine. City of Brisbane.
Terry O'Connell.
Ricardo Ortiz, he confirmed being absent. City of Daly City.
Pamela DiGiovanni, present.
City of Foster City. City of Half Moon Bay. Town of Hillsborough.
President Al Royce.
Supervisor Pine has just arrived.
City of Menlo Park. City of Millbrae.
Ann Schneider, present.
City of Pacifica.
Mike O'Neill, present.
Town of Portola Valley.
Ann Weingart.
City of Redwood City.
Giselle Hale.
City of San Bruno. City of San Carlos. City of San Mateo. City of South San Francisco.
Mark Adiego.
And Town of Woodside.
Tom Livermore.
Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Before we get into our agenda, I just feel that we have our whole San Mateo County elected board with us and the public, and the events over the last week, 10 days, starting in Gilroy and El Paso and Dayton, Ohio specifically. I'd like to have just 30 seconds of your time for just a quiet moment of silence. I know that James, for El Paso, is very personal to him. His family and relatives live very close to El Paso. His mom and sister were about a mile away when this happened. So if you just indulge me for 30 seconds, please, with a moment of silence in respect for the fallen. Thank you very much. So we have we have some special guests here tonight. We have with us from United, Glenn Morris, who's the Government Affairs. Glenn, thank you so much. He's raising his hand. As you know, United is our largest carrier out of San Francisco Airport. We also have Raquel Gervin, who is, yes, Raquel. So special. At least the height, you know. Raquel Gervin, who's a regional administrator for Western Services sector, and she's come up from El Segundo. And with her, she's going to introduce her fellow teammate. Yeah, it does go dead, doesn't it?
Yeah, come on up. So William Freeman is, we recently hired him as our community engagement officer. We at the FAA, as you know, are working on continuing engagement or improving our engagement with communities, and he is assigned to our region, and he is going to be one of the focal points for addressing community issues associated with aviation noise. And so he is kind of having a grand tour of all the roundtables that we've had so far, and so he'll be working with a national team as well. But again, his focus will be on issues in our Western Pacific region. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Raquel. We also have, let's see, yeah, you want to just put it on the podium, that would be fine. We also have with us tonight from Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office, Kathleen Wentworth, who has been invaluable to the Roundtable for advice, and with Congressman Jackie Spears' office. We also have representatives from Assemblyman Kevin Mullins' office, and I did not get who that is, but I know that they're there. There you are. Yes, sorry. And from Senator Jerry Hill's office. And there you go. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. So, getting on to our agenda. Number 2, we're going to skip over. It was to follow up from an award for the quietest airliner, and we just didn't get, they couldn't come tonight. So, is that right, Bert? We just didn't have them. So we'll pass over that one, and we'll go on to public comments for items that are not on the agenda. And I just want to let you know that I have also received 3 written communications from residents that I will submit to James to be included in the public record, and they will be listed online. I'm not going to take time to read them right now. The other thing before we get into public comments, I do want to bring to everyone's attention, and I'll speak to our roundtable members, if you would go to page 5 of your packet and make sure that you have taken a look at that, and I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from this page, which tells a little bit about the roundtable, just for clarification and to keep us on the same page, to kind of set expectations, to understand what the roundtable is and what they can and can't do, what authority they do have and what authority they don't have. Okay, so you understand our policy. Well, the body was formed in May 1981. It's been going on a long time, okay? But the policy statement, briefly, is that the Roundtable as a group will, when considering and taking actions to mitigate noise, they don't have the power to mitigate noise, but will, when we take action for policy direction, will not knowingly or deliberately support, encourage, or adopt actions, rules, regulations, or policies that result in the shifting of aircraft noise from one community to another when related to aircraft operations at San Francisco International Airport. So that was one of the founding tenets of the members. And then it goes on to say that the federal preemption regarding air flight patterns, that the authority to regulate flight patterns of aircraft is vested exclusively in the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. And it's not up to us as a body to make those changes. Only the FAA can make those changes. And as I understand it, only Congress can kind of direct the FAA, one way or another by passing laws. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this is a volunteer body. We represent the cities of San Mateo County as elected officials. We do not have the authority or the power to force the FAA to come to these meetings. to change a flight pattern, to do anything like that. All we can do is work together as respectively as we can with each other and collaboratively as we can with each other, respecting each other's opinions, and to not argue amongst ourselves, but try to find the common ground. So I really do expect that. And as far as public comments, the reason we can't respond to public comments that are making comments on items that are not on the agenda is because they're not agendized. They are not on the agenda. And so we cannot have discussion about it. We can bring it back to another agenda time as a topic of discussion and agendize it. And if you'd were at the last meeting, Director Sataro had said that he takes notes and he comes back with responses the next meeting. So just to set your expectations about that. That's why we cannot respond to your comments. And I do have a number of public comments for items that are not on the agenda. So I hope that these comments are all about topics that are not on the agenda, because if it looks like they are, then I'll ask you to stop and wait until that agenda item has come up, okay? Any questions? Anybody have any comments about that? If not, I'm going to open it for public comments, and the first resident is Rebecca Ward from Palo Alto, followed by Mark Schul of Palo Alto, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Is this on?
Yep.
Ah, perfect. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. I live in Palo Alto, and the reason I'm here is that probably about 2.5 million complaints have been lodged by Palo Alto residents. Since NextGen was implemented, we have had roughly 300 planes a day low overhead, and absolutely nothing has been done by the airport to mitigate the problem in Palo Alto. And the problem is severe. Recently, we had a city council meeting where the community got up and spoke, and it was really troubling to hear people talk about the fact that they can't sleep. Because while there's fly quiet for those of you who are on the roundtable, we get fly cargo. There are 747 planes that go over our houses after midnight, and we are inundated with planes every 1 to 2 minutes. You can't imagine what's happened to a community that used to be peaceful and quiet. And so I wanted to get up here because I wanted to be the voice of what I heard at that council meeting. And what was most troubling to me was the employee of JLS Middle School who got up and talked about the fact that you can't even hear the students speak because the plane is so loud. And everybody on this roundtable knows that that's probably impacting their learning because that's been presented at this roundtable. We heard from people who couldn't sleep at night. Their grandkids wouldn't stay with them. I mean, it's severe, and we know that that has health ramifications. On top of that, Congressman Adam Smith recently submitted written testimony saying that the concentration of next-gen routes submits the communities that live beneath them to ultrafine particulate matter, which is extremely dangerous. So Palo Alto, surprisingly, is not on the roundtable here because you voted not to include it since 1995, yet we have 3 routes that converge low over us. And I don't understand how you justify not including us on the roundtable, given the severe impact, because it gives the airport the ability to hide. They don't address our problems because we're not on the roundtable. They don't show up. And you could say, okay, well, you're on the Santa Cruz, Santa Clara roundtable now, which costs our community $33,000 versus the $1,500 that you just had to do. And that's just not right. We should be represented just like other impacted communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mark, and then Lilia Roland Sambruno.
Thank you. Also from Palo Alto, Mark Schull. I do appreciate that the roundtable does broadcast these meetings because in Palo Alto, many, many people watch them. They're very closely watched because of how much we are impacted. But I am very disappointed that you've chosen not to provide written minute meetings anymore. In trying to keep up with everything that is going on, we have to go back and look through 2 hours or 3 hours of video to find the main points. You're not providing your curated results. It's basically almost a reality TV thing where you get everybody's comments, and if we want to find out what that section's consensus was, we have to sort of decide for ourselves. And it's very frustrated. It's kind of one more feeling of, you're out there, we're here, we don't really get the information that's necessary in what I would say is a normal, professional way that a community body like this should do. I know that it costs more to produce those minutes. I've seen the notes from your discussions, but given the impact, we really do need to get real meeting minutes like there used to be for this roundtable, I think, to be effective and somehow give us a little bit of support. Thank you.
Elizabeth, Lilia, Roland, and then Elizabeth Lopez. Lilia's from San Bruno.
Hi, I'm here because I am getting very sick of the noise of the planes. This started since August 11, 2018. And when the plane went by, the first one, I thought it was a crash because my windows and everything was shaking, and then it continued. It took me a while to find out how to look into the website and everything. I had called, complained, I had brought letters to people at SFO, the director of SFO. I have asked help a lot, including writing to Ms. Diane Feinstein, but they say they have a lot of work. So what happens is the planes started going very fast and low at night, and they sometimes just keep going, and then they stop for an hour, and then you are trying to fall asleep, and then there it goes again. Now, they've been doing that for so much, and sometimes planes go 24/7, 200-300 planes, and then the roof is being, I don't know if I could call it damaged, but a contractor told me it cracks. Makes cracking noises. After they stop flying for an hour, the roof still goes the whole house. No matter what bedroom where I go, there are noises. There's many nights that I have to run out of my house during the day to get some rest. My doctors tell me, because I was recovering from a car accident, said, this is very bad, very dangerous. I said, I'm tired of complaining. When I talk to the vendors about windows, they said, we'll charge you a lot of money for these windows, but we don't guarantee this noise is impossible to deal with. You have to talk to SFO. So at this point, I look at this that it is inhumane the way this whole thing continues. And other residents where I live, they said they have had this noise. They put the windows, and only the people that SFO helped them with the noise abatement program helps, but nothing else. And I find this so abusive. And so I'm hoping now the communities are beginning to get together, including some of the churches that I go, because we figure this is too much. So I am here now that I'm better, because they told me don't come here because maybe nothing will happen. This is Lilia. Thank you.
Elizabeth Lopez, San Francisco, then Rosie Hayes from San Mateo and Foster City.
I just wanted to talk about priorities, and the reason I bring that up is because the 65 CN DNEL is such a very, very small area that's covered for residents who are getting bombarded by flights day in, day out, and some of them are able to get some help for the Second Chance program, and it just seems like it's so little money. I think it was maybe $1 million, and I don't know if anyone can correct me. It was between $1 and $2 million that was allocated, just to help this very, very small group of people who are really getting bombarded really terribly. But in the same respect, we're we're able to find like 50 billion or 50 million to do repairs and hundreds of millions to build a hotel and, you know, just hundreds of millions of dollars to do any kind of refurbishing or whatever the airport needs, but still we're only able to find $1 million to help people who need a lot of help with the noise abatement in their homes. And so it's just a matter of priorities, and I'm wondering who's making these priorities, who's making these decisions. I don't know. Is there anybody that can even answer who's?
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, we cannot have a dialogue at this point with this.
Okay, but do
we'll take
people
a note.
actually know?
Well,
Do you know?
we can't talk about this at this point.
Okay,
Thank
well, I'm
you.
just I was just asking a yes or no question. Does someone even know?
Elizabeth,
Okay,
thank you.
okay.
Rosie Hayes from San Mateo and Foster City area, and then Lucy Romoli from Foster City.
Hi, everyone. I live on the edge of San Mateo, right by Foster City. And I've lived there for 22 years. I've lived in Foster City area for about 32. I want to say I'm kind of disappointed overall in the fact that there seems to be very little attention paid to the noise issues from flights landing at SFO. That's the flights landing on 28 left and 28 right. As a reminder, for those of you that aren't aware, if you think you've got 300 flights and that's a problem, there are something like 700, 750 flights per day landing on 28 left and 28 right. They come in at something like 1,200 feet over our area. The noise is unbelievable. Now, I've lived there for 22 years. Up until about 18 months ago, I really didn't have a noise issue. Suddenly, something has changed. I also want to point out that if you look at the San Francisco Director's report, the noise monitor in Foster City gets more noise issues come up than any other area, including San Bruno, by the way. Not always the highest level, but the most number of noise issues. There's something going on in that Foster City, East San Mateo area. I'm going to give you some examples of how my life has changed. I used to be able to sleep in the summer with my windows open. I was never woken by plane noise. Now, I cannot have the windows open at all. I have to have a white noise machine. I have to wear earplugs every single night. My mother, who's hard of hearing, came to visit me last June, shortly after this issue happened. She was shocked at the change in the noise. She had her window open that night, and guess what? She had to get up and close it. She's hard of hearing, and she was woken. There's something going on. I'm actually going to be replacing my windows at my own cost to get some noise abatement ones because I can't sleep. And when the issue is explored, and some people have looked into this briefly, we're told that there is no change. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. No, something has changed. So I'm requesting that the noise from the arrivals on 28 left and 28 right are actually reviewed to find out what is creating the noise problems in San Mateo and Foster City.
Thank you, Rosie. I'm going to have to ask you to
Thank you.
wrap up. Thank you. So Lucy and then Darlene Yapley from Palo Alto. Lucy's from Foster City also.
Yes, thank you, and it's Romilly. Romilly.
Romilly.
All right, thank you. I don't mean to be repetitive, but this issue is going to have to take a lot of repeating to be heard. There are so many huge issues that we face in our society today, and I don't mean to belittle them by calling attention to what we're experiencing locally. I have been a resident of Foster City since 1970, but I moved on the Widewater in 1979. That means our backyard is 650 square feet of deck with full walkout sliding doors on both levels. And yes, something has happened. I now look forward to winter. And the reason for that, at our own expense, we put in double pane windows, we've insulated the roof. And when in wintertime, I can hear the TV. But in summertime, when the windows are open, I have to say to my husband, we need to close the windows. I can't hear it. And that's with the sound decibel on the television up. I had a family gathering on our deck on a Sunday. As I'm walking out bringing food to the deck, a plane, a commercial airline, flies over, and my 6'2" nephew ducked and looked around. We're also in an age of home-based business. I'm a headhunter. I interview by Skype or FaceTime. I don't need to be on a plane anymore, thanks to technology. I have to close the windows or leave my upstairs office and go downstairs so that I can hear candidates and they can hear me. My daughter is a sales rep and will sometimes work at our home. She will use my upstairs office. In the boiling heat, we're actually getting heat now in Foster City, she closed the doors and I said, Jenna, what are you doing? You're sweating. And she said, I can't hear when I'm making a cold call. So I'm hoping this issue will be addressed. It has changed. We're uncomfortable. It's impacting us emotionally, socially, and professionally. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Darlene Yapley, and then Jason Kerr from Oakland.
Supersonic flight authorizations. August 27th is the deadline to comment on special flight authorizations for supersonic aircraft. Please comment, everybody in the audience and the roundtable. On the website it says, with renewed interest in supersonic aircraft development, the FAA is proposing to modernize the procedure for requesting these special flight authorizations. The original authorizations were developed in the 70s. For all of those knowledgeable people in the audience, when do you think the DNL metric was determined? 1974. So let's encourage the FAA to also modernize the DNL noise metric that was developed again in 1974, given the renewed interest in noise impacts due to NextGen. The FAA should not be allowed to authorize supersonic flights, louder flights, until we solve the noise problems created by NextGen. Once they solve that, then they should have the FAA share the potential impact of supersonic flights on residential communities. I ask again, everybody please comment on this. I have the link, it's long, so I'm not gonna read it. And I also sent it in, so you should be able to get that. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. Jason Kerr, Oakland, and then Rojas, okay, also from Oakland, after him. Thank you.
Hi, I live in Oakland, and that's one part of what I want to talk about is representing Oakland here, similar to the Palo Alto concern. I moved to Oakland 2 to 3 years ago, and it seemed nice in our house. We noticed a few planes, but not that many. And then within a year, it just got insane, and it's gotten worse and worse as we've lived there, to the point that I walk around the house with noise-canceling headphones on, that I turn up the music whenever possible as soon as I get home. It's just, it's a nightmare, and again, that we're thinking about spending up to $100,000 to insulate our house that, of course, the FAA won't pay for because of the sort of insane decibel threshold that you have to meet. And so that's one point that I want to speak to is that it seems surprising to me if we're representing the impact of the SFO on our community, that again, why isn't Oakland involved? I've heard some discussion about paperwork at the last meeting, which just feels like such a lazy response, honestly. And then the second thing is talking about just solutions and what can be done. It's doing the research on this, which again is this added cost for us of having to find all of these things out, and hearing all of you, which, honestly, I feel for so many of you, and this is sort of sad to hear so many different people with the same problem. And this problem is, to me, doesn't seem that difficult. It's clear that the FAA just chose not to consider the issue of noise, and they're still choosing to ignore it. And that's the key thing. It's lovely that you all are here to meet with us, but I've seen these meetings in Oakland, and I've seen these other meetings, and it's just a lot of sort of hand-waving. And if you all want to show that you're here to make real progress and work with us, come with real solutions. It's clear there's nothing new you need to figure out, really. And I think that's a very simple ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Rojas, and then we have Robert Holbrook.
Hi, I'm here as an Oakland resident as well, and I want to give voice to a community that does not have a seat at the table. 40% of SFO departures fly over our neighborhood. That's a flight every 3 to 4 minutes between 8 and 6,000 feet. I want to repeat here what I already shared at the Oakland Roundtable, that NextGen is a failure of design. With the presence of safety and efficiency as the main metric for success, we've neglected one of the most important factors, a metric for human impact, especially in the communities on the ground holding the burden of an ever-increasing airline industry. I'm also here to share the data of 3 residents of our neighborhood. Over the last year, increasing numbers of flights are flying lower and lower. Mr. David Ong from SFO Noise Abatement reported to one of our residents in a letter dated June 28th that aircraft altitudes over Oakland remain very consistent. From our experience, this is absolutely not the case. I've actually gone through and charted all of our reports. Every dot you see here is a person interrupting whatever they were doing to report the noise. Imagine living a life like this. 3 people over a year reporting every 2 to 3 minutes. Not only that, in my analysis, I saw that United Airlines is 3 times most likely to be the cause of this report. So these are insights that we can use to refine this design, but yet we choose not to. And I was really surprised to hear Mr. Sotero say in the last roundtable that he was not aware of any changes. How is it possible that a citizen can create this analysis and SFO, with all the information available, is not proactively monitoring changes? I'm afraid this space has become a holding pattern where representatives of the FAA come here and claim they're listening to communities. At the exact same time, they continue to push their agenda and the noise is getting worse and worse and worse. I understand every system has constraints. Yes, the FAA and SFO have not offered viable solutions that would relieve our communities. As a designer, to me, this comes from a lack of creativity, a lack of imagination, a lack of empathy, and a spirit of greed. The airline industry and airports are profiting at the expense of quality of life, our mental health, and human right to peace and quiet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Robert Holbrook, and then Doreen Gottlieb from South San Francisco.
I'm here to speak to the topic of supersonic transport and the regulation of that. It was already mentioned that rulemaking is, comments are due on August 27th, and I'd like to give a little more insight into what I think is likely to happen here. I followed the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 as it went through House committees and the Senate. And a version that was drafted in the Senate specifically had language in it that would roll back the noise standards to be used for the manufacture of supersonic jets to the 1974 standard that is Stage 3. Now, a little background, Stage 3 standards are louder than Stage 4 standards. Stage 4 standards are louder than Stage 5 standards. And Stage 5 is what you need to manufacture to if you're building a new plane today. Whether or not the sonic booms occur over us, and they are being tested in Houston right now, the larger airplane, the smaller airplane engines will have an outsized effect on the noise of airplanes landing and taking off into our airports. And so I think we can count on the fact that industry is going to reassert that it wants manufacturer exemptions from the Stage 5 standards, that they're going to want to go back to 1974 Stage 3 standards, and I encourage all of us to comment that that is simply not acceptable when we have the kind of noise problems that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Doreen, and then the last public comment speaker would be Jennifer from Sunnyvale.
Greetings. I know my time is limited, but I feel that maybe the public should be able to speak a little bit longer. This way the public won't be taking out our aggressions out on the complaint phone line. And I want to tell Bert and his staff that I really apologize for being so colorful when I call and complain. I recently lost a family member going, turn off the light, get ready to relax, and sure as shit, planes start flying over, and it's like, and then I call, because after about the 7th plane flying over, I'm about ready to lose it, and I start screaming into the phone. I don't like it looking like that. It's, it's these planes, and when they're taken off, they're very low, they're very loud, and it's just, I was speaking with a new neighbor recently who mentioned about the noise. And she goes, she called her real estate guy, and he told her that there was a clause in the papers that she signed that says something about, well, the planes that fly over us, I'm just going to have to put up with it because I can't change it. And that just kind of like floored me. I thought, wow, there's a clause? Wow. My house was built in 1949, has no insulation in the walls or the attics, and I'll tell you, I can't wait till I can have my stuff renovated. I kind of like brought the renovation retrofit fund to light, and here I can't even enjoy it. Harry Wick, the guy from the construction company, when he came out to my house in May, said, hey, I'm just going to tell you right now, don't expect anything to happen real soon. And that's sad, because it's like the airport never took any of us poor slobs into consideration. And now we have to put up with all this noise stuff, and that the fun thing isn't going to take care of our problem. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doreen. Yes, good job. Jennifer, yes, from Sunnyvale.
Hello. As we all know, NextGen prioritizes safety and efficiency, and noise has little consideration. I get it. I do. But we really need to be thinking about the residents here and noise. NextGen concentrates the flights, and because of that, there has been an uproar nationally. Throughout the nation, we have people impacted. Now the airlines are developing new supersonic aircraft, as Darlene and Robert have mentioned. These flights will be very, very loud, even at non-supersonic speeds. They will be. The way the engines are, it is loud. We need to say enough is enough. We already have a problem with noise. We already know once something is implemented, it is hard to change it. We need to intervene here. We need to say no supersonic in the metroplexes. No supersonic in the metroplexes. We cannot allow this to occur until NextGen is solved. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for your comments, and we will try to respond where we can, and we take your comments to heart and feel for you there. So, going back to our agenda, the next item is our consent agenda, items 4 and 5, which are the review of the Roundtable regular meeting action minutes for April 3rd and June 5th, 2019, and then the airport director's reports for May and June 2019. I do not have any speaker slips for these items. I'd like to ask the Roundtable membership if they have any, Any questions or items that they want to pull on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Move that we accept the consent.
Mike O'Neill from Pacifica moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
From Pamela from Daly City. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The regular agenda is, I'm going to turn it over to Doug Yeakel, our Communications Director from San Francisco Airport, for the SFO updates.
Thank you, Chairperson Lewis. Just a few updates from the airport for this meeting. We mentioned in our last roundtable meeting plans to close one of our runways for reconstruction work in September, and just to kind of reconfirm what's happening there, effective September 7th, we're going to close runway 28 left for a period of 20 days. Essentially, the reason we're doing this is to construct a new base layer below the runway surface where it intersects with runways 1 left and 1 right. This is about a 1,900-foot section that we're going to be working on. Because this runway is one of the runways used primarily for landing, closing it will reduce our overall arrival capacity. So we do expect delays during this period. We also expect the potential for cancellations. Airlines have made some voluntary adjustments to their flight schedule, both reductions and shifting flights off peak periods as a result of this. So the total airline flight schedule reduction that's occurred during this 20-day closure is about 13%. Even with those reductions in place, we still expect to experience delays. They'll just be of a lesser duration than we would have otherwise experienced. So probably on average, delays of 30 to 45 minutes on average, with some up to 2 hours in length. So we've got contingencies in place to try and get this work done earlier than 20 days, but that's the timeline that we're targeting right now. No real change in GBAS in terms of the timeline. We're still hoping to begin flying overlay procedures of GBAS in the second quarter of 2020, and innovative procedures probably in the latter half of 2021, and we'll keep you posted. And of course, as we committed to circulate innovative procedures with this body before we submit anything for final approval. Second chance and noise replacement, I think we've got a slide with some updated numbers there. While we're pulling that up, I'll just update you on passenger traffic at SFO. So Ivar mentioned in the last meeting, and this trend continues, our passenger traffic this year is actually slightly lower than it was a year ago, to the tune of about 0.7% below where it was in 2018. Although international traffic continues to grow, domestic traffic is down, and because that's such a larger portion of our overall activity, it's about 78% of our overall activity. That's why we're seeing the passenger counts down a little bit. Maybe a little bit difficult to see on the slide there. The overall number of applications has not changed much since our last report out to you, nor has the number of applications within the noise exposure map. We'll have this in the packet, by the way. The one additional item we've added is a third column which talks about the number of homes that we've already visited. So those numbers between the replacement and second chance, we visited about 450 homes already to evaluate eligibility for either replacement or second chance. And we expect this work to begin probably in mid-2020, and we'll keep you posted on the progress there. That's all I have.
Any roundtable member? Mike O'Neill, yes?
Could you please explain what is GBAS? And I'd like to remind everybody if we can not use acronyms, because there's a lot of people here that don't know what you're talking about.
Sure.
So what is GBAS?
That's a ground-based augmentation system. It's a landing system that uses a boosted global positioning system, or GPS signal, that would allow for more sophisticated landing patterns than what are currently available today. This is a technology that is not officially endorsed yet by the FAA. Our airport, along with about 8 other airports in the U.S., are independently funding the exploration of this technology in the hopes of demonstrating to the FAA that this is a feasible system to adopt officially in the future. The reason we talk about it in a noise form is that it has the potential for flight procedures that don't exist today that might benefit certain communities along the landing patterns leading into SFO. So it might allow aircraft to fly higher than they do today before they come in to land at SFO. It might allow aircraft to land further down the runway than they do, which would also affect glide slope angles. And then also potentially very advanced procedures could include curved procedures that keep more aircraft offshore. So again, this is a technology that has yet to be proven, but something that our airport is funding.
So just to follow up, conceivably with this landing technology, the communities that could benefit from that might be Palo Alto, might be Menlo Park, might be Foster City, those kinds of things. And that is something that San Francisco Airport has control over and doesn't, it's not like changing a flight procedure, it's the technology. It's not like going through the FAA, but you have to get the FAA to sign off on it.
Correct. At the end of the day, the FAA is the sole arbitrator of any flight procedure. So we've got a team that is working on procedures that could have a community benefit. We're going to be circulating these procedures in the roundtable format, but ultimately these will get submitted to the FAA for review and possible adoption. So ultimately the FAA is still involved in this approval process.
So we've had several very detailed presentations along the way, probably before you joined the roundtable, Mike, and about the GBAS technology. And maybe at our next technical working group meeting in September, would you and your team be willing to come and give another primer about
Certainly,
it?
yeah.
That date has yet to be targeted, finalized, but that would be the time to do it because it's an more informal process. There was another, Ann Schneider, Millbrae.
Hello, have a couple of questions. So when runway 28 closes, you said that there could be delays or is that going to shift any arrivals onto 1 or 19?
No, we don't expect it to change the way that we arrive and depart traffic during this period. So we're still planning on landing all of our flights on 28 right and departing most traffic on one of the either one left or one right, and for international flights 28 right. So no change in patterns during this time.
So with the delays, does that mean that more flights are going to be pushed from evening into night?
It's possible. Part of the reason airlines have reduced their schedule is to limit the extent of those delays, but that is a possibility.
Okay, I'm speaking for Millbrae, I'm sure, and for other airlines, we would appreciate most of those being, if they have to be at night, not into evening. You also said that traffic is down 0.7%, but international traffic is increasing. International traffic, and please correct me, are bigger, heavier planes that also tend to leave in the evening and night. Is that correct?
And really what we're seeing is not necessarily an increase in flights, an increase in passenger traffic. And in a lot of cases where we're seeing the growth from airlines is in increasing the type of aircraft that they're using to fly a certain market. So maybe an airline that would previously operate a Boeing 777 has now upgauged it to a A380, for example.
The reason I bring that up, and I'm very grateful that we have higher office elected staff here tonight, the heavier the plane, the greater the backblast noise, the greater the low frequency noise. So whereas it might be fewer flights because they're bigger planes, for those of us close into the airport, it actually increases that type of noise. And when that shifts into the nighttime, that is also taking away people's sleep.
Any other member from the roundtable have, Supervisor Pine?
Just getting back to the GBAS for a second, Doug, maybe you could walk us through the rollout, or you said there's kind of two phases coming up, and I didn't quite follow you.
Yeah, absolutely. So step number one is essentially before we can explore procedures that don't exist today, we need to demonstrate to the FAA that GBAS can replicate the way that aircraft land today. So step number one is what we call a GBAS overlay, essentially replicating patterns that are operated using other navigational systems in a GBAS format. And that's really what we're hoping to have in place, airlines actually flying a GBAS overlay procedure second quarter of next year. That then paves the way for innovative procedures that don't currently exist.
Okay.
Anyone else? Anne, one more time?
Can I just publicly say congratulations to SFO for being the first airline or the first airport or in the world to ban plastic water bottles. So great coverage, great activity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's really good. Anything else? Oh, okay. I do have a speaker card that got slipped in at the last second. Mark Schul from Palo Alto. Okay. Doug, on item number 6.
I think if you look at the presentation by Airport Director Sodero last meeting, or maybe it was the meeting before, what you see in the slides and the map is that, in fact, where the RNP to GLS procedure goes is not over San Mateo County, pretty much. It's over Santa Clara County.
Oh, excuse me, are you talking about the pirate?
No, I'm talking about the RNP to GLS, GBAS. GLS is GBAS landing system.
Somehow I thought
The replacement for the ILS. Any rate, my point is that what you have committed to is to ask this body permission to put an even more concentrated procedure on the other county. That's the approval procedure that you've put in place. And I don't think that's right. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to item number 7, and I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Pine to talk about the comment letters regarding San Francisco Airport Development Plan.
Great, thanks, Chair Lewis. So this is an information item. As everyone will recall, SFO has developed what they call the Recommended Airport Development Plan, which is a very substantial construction plan to accommodate the potential maximum passenger capacity at the airport. So, the airport basically, without building new runways, as I recall, can accommodate upwards of 71 million passengers. But to do that, a lot of new buildings and structures and roads and other sort of things need to be constructed. So in connection with their efforts to do this, just like with any other development plan, they have to prepare, do a CEQA, an environmental analysis. And with CEQA, the first thing you do is put out a notice of an NFO, which basically helps to scope what you will study in the environmental documents. So the County of San Mateo and a couple of the cities here adjacent to the airport, including San Bruno, Pacifica, South City, and Millbrae, all submitted letters to the San Francisco Planning Department, which is actually the group that will oversee all this work, giving comments on various things that we wanted to make sure that the EIR covers. So this is the very, very first step in this process. So among other points, the county and some of the cities emphasize that we really want to be sensitive to ground-based noise. And we're learning a lot through our ground-based noise subcommittee that, how you taxi planes and where you put buildings and how big they are can have impacts on ground-based noise. Other factors, of course, are things like in transportation, air quality, sea level rise, and others. So the letters are in the packet, and probably most importantly, they all emphasize that the local cities need to be, notified each step of the way as this proceeds. And we also specifically ask that the roundtable be noticed so that we can use this body to kind of get the word out as this project proceeds over probably a couple of decades for it all to be constructed. So, and again, it's an information item. I think you'll find the letters of interest, and it's the first step in a long process.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the roundtable want to make a comment or a question? Giselle, Redwood City.
So first question for perhaps the chair or staff. I have only attended 2 of these meetings, but I've noticed that there isn't normally a San Francisco representative. Is that?
Sometimes there is.
But not consistently.
Last meeting, there was, but, you know.
And the main reason I ask is it would seem like that would be an important piece of feedback for them to hear. So I don't know if we have the opportunity to engage them on finding somebody who could attend regularly. But then my follow-up question for Supervisor Pine is really helpful to see the letters. Do you intend to send staff or representatives from the cities to their, it sounds like it's planning, so I don't know if it's their planning commission meeting or what that process looks like, but so that we make sure that we're being heard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea here is to make sure that the San Francisco Planning Department, notifies the cities so they can insert themselves in the process. So in reviewing the draft EIR, and as you know from planning, there's many steps. I mean, ultimately, I think the outreach this time around, probably wasn't as comprehensive as it might have been, or might not have gone to the right people. So I think next time there's a need to update the community, the notices will be better. There was, we specifically made a number of requests about improving the noticing, for example.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll close that item and go on to item number 8, Title 21 Overview. We're going to have a presentation by our HMH consultant, Jean Rydell. Thank you, Jean.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. There have been questions raised about Title 21 and its importance, particularly with airport noise monitoring. So I've gone through Title 21 and came up with this agenda, working with some of the people on the roundtable. So talk about the purpose of noise monitoring as it pertains to Title 21, location and number of noise monitors, noise monitor site selection, threshold noise level, reporting requirements, and then give an example towards the end. A little primer on Title 21. It's basically the state of California's noise standard for as it relates to aircraft noise. So what is the purpose of noise monitoring? It's really to validate the noise impact boundary. The noise impact boundary, by definition in Title 21, is the 65 CNEL contour. So in short, again, the purpose of noise monitoring is to determine the location and size and shape of the noise impact boundary. The location and number of noise monitors. So the location shall be selected to facilitate locating the maximum extent or where the closure points are for the noise impact boundary. And the number of monitors varies by airport, but must be adequate to ensure the accuracy tolerance of plus or minus 1.5 dB in terms of the CNEL metric for location of, again, that noise impact boundary in areas where land use is incompatible. Now, not all land use is incompatible within the noise impact boundary, but places of most interest, like residential properties, yes, they are incompatible with aircraft noise inside the noise impact boundary, which is the 65 CNEL. Noise monitor site selection. You need to have CNEL at a site from non-aircraft noise sources to be less than 55 dB. And one of the reasons for that is that gives you a 10 dB window in order to measure then aircraft noise, which is on the order of 65 CNEL and higher. You want them to be within residential areas, but not immediately adjacent to noisy industry, freeway, railroad tracks, those sorts of other noise sources. Again, where you want them in a place where you can measure pretty accurately the aircraft noise environment for that location. The microphone is to be 20 feet above ground level or at least 10 feet above neighboring rooftops, whichever is higher, and they must have a clear line of sight to the path of the aircraft in flight. So you not only have to take into account what the environment is like on the ground, but also what is the noise source of the aircraft, where is the aircraft, and do you have a direct line of sight to that aircraft for that path or paths that you're measuring at that particular site. And lastly, no obstructions can significantly influence the sound field from the aircraft within a conical space above the microphone. And if you look at that drawing there, it shows that conical space of 75 degrees around the microphone. And that is a cone, so it goes all the way around the microphone. It needs to be clear of obstructions, barriers, other houses, other buildings that could get in the way from, again, having that direct line of sight to the aircraft of which you're trying to measure. The noise, the threshold noise level, there's been a lot of talk about what that is. It's really clear in the Title 21 that it's to be threshold noise level at the monitor is set to be 55 dB. What that means is that the noise monitor has a threshold. Any noise below the threshold is not added into that noise event that it's measuring. And so once it goes above that threshold, it then triggers that there's a noise event being measured, and until it drops then again below that threshold noise level, it is a single noise event. Now, Title 21 did also include waivers to be granted in cases where the airport proprietor can demonstrate the accuracy of the CNEL measurement of aircraft will remain within plus or minus 1.5 dB. And there's good reason for this threshold waiver to be in place, is because not all places that you're doing the measurement do you want the threshold to be set at 55. Again, you want to be sure that the threshold is set appropriately to measure what it is you're trying to measure, and that source is aircraft noise. And so at some sites you might need it to be higher, you might need it to be lower. And it also depends on the ambient noise in the area as well. Because if the ambient noise at where you're measuring is always above 55, then you're not going to get these single aircraft events. So you might have to raise it up in order to not have that in there. And in other places, if the aircraft events aren't much above 65 or 70 dB, maybe you need to set it lower than that as well. Oh, the wrong one? Do you have a thumb drive?
Keep going. It was good. It was good for me. I was following it.
I hadn't heard that. So this is
Thumb drive.
Okay, so as I was saying, 55 dB is, according to Title 21, the noise threshold for the monitors, but that can be raised up and down, but you need state approval or a waiver from the state to do that.
What, is it an updated one or something? Oh. But this is not in our packet. But it will be posted on the website, right? We can.
I believe so.
Your PowerPoint.
Right.
Yeah, but we do love your narrative.
Okay. Thanks, Bert. So the state of, and for the situation and what was added to this, which is why Bert caught it, is because what is important here is that the state of California has approved all the thresholds that are set at all the noise monitors for the San Francisco Airport's noise monitoring plan. And it includes waivers for the threshold deviations as part of the current noise and operations monitoring system. As you know, San Francisco did just select a vendor to replace the noise monitors with more state-of-the-art monitors. So San Francisco will have to actually submit a new noise monitoring plan to show that those monitors are appropriately placed and set to do the measurements and including the threshold waivers if they need them at the particular locations that they have them. So that'll be part of the installation plan for the new monitoring system. So reporting requirements. SFO will submit quarterly noise reports to the Roundtable technical consultant as well as the state for California for filing. The Roundtable agenda, I understand, will begin to include a summary of the submitted quarterly noise reports by the technical consultant on a regular basis. And what's in the report? The report is very structured in what is supposed to be in that according to Title 21 requirements. Now you can go beyond those things, but you have to at least submit these things with it. There is a form that is in part of Title 21 called DOA 617 and dated 10/89, October 1989. So that form has to be complete and submitted with the report. There has to be a map illustrating the location of the noise impact boundary. Again, the noise impact boundary by definition is the 65 CNEL, and the measurement points. The annual noise impact area is obtained from the 4 preceding calendar quarters. You have to also have an estimate of the dwelling units within that noise impact boundary and an estimate of the number of people residing therein. You also, the report has to have daily CNEL measurements at each of the noise monitoring points or locations, the number of aircraft operations, and the estimated number of operations by the highest noise level aircraft type. So those are the reporting requirements, the things that must be in the quarterly noise reports. Here's an example of recent quarterly noise data for San Francisco showing the site number, the city it's in, the area, and then the by quarter each of the aircraft CNEL noise levels, as well as the annual CNEL. So to cut to the chase, showing the one of the, I think this is fourth quarter 2018 that we were able to obtain. So the outermost green area there is that noise impact boundary or the 65 CNEL. And so according to Title 21, I went ahead and actually circled those monitors that are minimally required to meet Title 21. And the reason that is those are in the locations that you can see where the contour actually closes or to the extent that it goes out. And so R18 and R4 show the contour out over San Bruno, and where between those two monitors is where it closes. And you can somewhat see the levels there. It's 68.4, I think, at R4, and it's, I think you can't see the one on the R18. I think it's around 63.6, if I remember right out there. So somewhere in between it closes, and it indeed does close between those points. And then R8, you can see is 65.5, and you see that the boundary is essentially right there. And then at R12, it's less than 65 out there. And then all the rest is over water, so you can't have noise monitors out in the water. So those are really minimally the 4 that are required by Title 21. I will say that when San Francisco first installed these noise monitoring locations, noise and operations monitoring systems did not have flight track data like they do today. And so a lot of the reasons for the high number of monitors here is that you would use them to determine whether it was an aircraft noise event or not. For example, if an aircraft took off and it set off this monitor and then this monitor and then a few seconds later that monitor, you would say, okay, all those 3 noise events were indeed an aircraft because it was following a path. So what some of the monitors were set up to do were follow the paths that were in place back in the 80s, or I think it was the 80s when it was installed. 70s? All right, 70s. So that's some of the reason for some of them. And so there's many reasons for where they are. But again, I wanted to point out that to meet Title 21 today, you could probably very likely just use those 4 monitors that I circled there and be in compliant with Title 21. With that, I can take questions.
Sure. Mike O'Neill. Pacific?
You said that in terms of the aircraft that are being monitored, is that all types of aircraft, passengers as well as cargo?
Yes.
Okay. Now, looking at the contours, have those been revised since Next Gen?
Yes, they have. They're done once a quarter. I believe you do them once a quarter. Right. But for Title 21, again, what we're talking about today, they're done on a quarterly basis. But it is an annual contour, but it's updated each quarter.
Meaning, okay, so am I understanding you correctly in that all noise monitors have to be within the contour, right?
No, they have to be in an area that you can determine the extent of the contour.
Okay. And the contours are defined and started by what? Flight patterns?
The contours today are generated using the FAA's Aviation and Environmental Design Tool, or AEDT.
And where does that get the data in order to make this?
So the data that is usually used to provide those contours are the flight track and aircraft identification data that's captured on the noise and operations monitoring system at the airport.
So can you explain why, if you're getting data that has the flight paths, basically the flights that are flying, their numbers, their routes and everything, and we heard many people come and talk about how the noise has started in the last 6 months or since Next Gen, why has the contours not changed, and therefore the noise monitoring change if the flight paths have changed?
Well, there's a number of reasons for that, and I would be guessing at some of them, but I will stick my neck out here a little bit. Most of the changes that occurred with the implementation of the Metroplex with next-gen aircraft procedures occurred well outside the 65 CNEL contour. So in a nutshell, that's basically why you're not seeing a big change inside the 65 CNEL contour pre and post Metroplex. And that was somewhat by design of the Metroplex, because they didn't want to make changes within the 65 CNEL, because had that been shown to occur, it probably would have went from an EA to an EIS, because they would have had noise impact.
EA, EIS, what does that mean?
Environmental analysis to an environmental impact statement, which is the next level that the FAA would go to if they found that there were going to be impacts of that nature. But there were no impacts of that nature within the 65 CNEL.
Okay, so you're saying it would have went from an EA to an EIS?
It may have done that, yes, because you would have had impacts within the 65 CNEL.
So do I understand you correctly then that EIS is something people don't want and the FAA doesn't want to do, and while an EA is kind of easier to do? EIS causes more noise than an EA?
No,
It's the other way around?
an EIS is just another level of evaluation that you would do if you found that there would be significant impacts. And so it might trigger you to take it to the next level and do an environmental impact statement rather than an environmental analysis.
May I interject just really quickly here? Because I think that we have a little confusion about what the noise contour map is and the effect of next-gen, the concentration of air flights in a single path, what has been outside of the noise contours directly around the airport. The 65 CNEL is really concentrated in that contour, because and even if you have a single event, which may be over 65 decibel, right? It doesn't constitute the contour creation. Am I getting that wrong? Can you explain that a little bit better? The reason that the contour is there is because the noise is always there.
Correct.
At 65.
Correct.
Or higher.
What goes into the development of the contour is What aircraft types are flying? Where are each of those aircraft types flying? How often are they flying, and when are they flying? Because remember, CNEL has weightings for evening and nighttime periods that make the noise more than it actually is measured on the ground. And so what Title 21 is attempting to do is to determine where that noise impact boundary is and to validate that noise impact boundary based on measurements. And so, which is exactly what's done through the Title 21 reports that San Francisco International Airport are publishing, is to show that the contours are where they should be according to Title 21 practices.
So would it be, wait, I want to.
Supervisor Pine would just like to.
I just wanted to ask, could he come with a slide that we've seen from other places where the flight patterns for next gen are, and superimpose that on the contours?
It's not the same thing.
Well, I'm sorry, but if the people are keep complaining about the noises and they're having planes every 4 minutes or something, 4 planes in a minute, I would like to see, it seems to me that the noise is happening in places that aren't necessarily in the contour. At least I know in Pacifica, where I live, I'm hearing the planes, but it's not on this contour.
Correct.
So I would think if we could have a map, superimpose the contours on the flight patterns which we have seen before from next gen, I think this is something that we should be discussing.
Well, that can be done. You can superimpose. These are all geographic information system layers, if you will, so you can layer those maps. The map would be extended way out further because of those procedures extend, way out like you've heard today. But yes, you could superimpose those.
Is that something we could have for the next meeting?
No. Okay. Can a point of order? I'm going to have Supervisor Pine make a comment, then Ann Schneider, and then Carol Ford. Okay, and then I will make a comment.
Just a quick comment, Mike. There's this state requirement, Title 21 requires a certain reporting. So your questions really kind of go to the bigger picture.
It's not the same thing.
This is just a state regulation that we have to comply with, which many of us weren't familiar with until the last year or two. So in some respects, this is like a really technical thing we're talking about. Your questions, which are pertinent, we in some ways don't relate to this because we're just trying to understand what does Title 21 require, and are we meeting the Title 21 process? So you're asking a bigger question is, how should we map or assess pre and post next gen noise events? Just my comment. But getting back to, I'll just segue to my question, which is maybe just take it up a level. We know that the FAA, controls everything when it comes to flight procedures. So why is it that the state even has Title 21? In that it's a lot of work, a lot of technical compliance, a lot of reports to be prepared. So who in the state gets this? You kind of mentioned, I think you mentioned that the monitors, you have to have monitors, to meet the standards. And someone in the state, I think you said, has to sign off. So who are these people in the state? And in some respects, it seems like a waste of time because it's not, the state, I don't think has any authority to do anything with the data, do they?
Yeah, so let's step back a bit in Title 21. So at the crux of Title 21 is that it provided a basis for a county to determine that an airport within its jurisdiction is, quote, a noise problem airport. Once the county designates an airport as being a noise problem airport, as has been done by San Mateo County for San Francisco International Airport, it is then incumbent upon them to be sure that these reports are being done. And the purpose of the reports is to show the number of people, number of residences within the noise impact boundary, the 65 CNEL, because you actually need a variance to operate a noise problem airport if you have people impacted within that boundary. And that's where sound insulation has come to play a part in California as well, is that once you have provided sound insulation to the structures that people live in, then they are now compatible with this inside the noise impact boundary. And once you show compatibility, you then, if everybody is then compatible within the 65 CNEL, you no longer need that variance to operate the airport.
Who grants this variance? Is that sounds like an FAA matter.
No, it's a state. It's a state, state, county, and airport work out the variances.
Caltrans Division of Aeronautics. Okay. It has nothing really to do with the bigger question, Mike, that you keep bringing up of the flights overhead that are making our residents sick, waking them up, because and the way we measure the sound effect needs to change fundamentally. That needs to change so that our residents can get some relief from federal and state funds.
And
I'm going to let
Look,
Ann
I would just
speak.
like to see the noise monitors go to where the flight patterns are today.
Was you first?
Not
Mhm.
where they are
Yeah,
originally.
yeah. Okay, Ann, go ahead.
Okay, a couple of questions from your comments. You said earlier that the noise monitors were set up for direct line of sight. So when you set up a monitor on direct line of sight, what type of noise are you picking up? Or are the monitors attempting to pick up?
Well, all the noise monitors are for this purpose, to meet Title 21, are supposed to measure the aircraft noise at that location.
All noise,
Aircraft noise.
including noise as they're still on the ground and to 5 feet above ground.
For
noise that is
certain,
not
for
part of
certain
the FAA
locations,
ruling.
for certain locations, yes. So for instance, I know for your area, it's the backblast noise. And yes, the monitors have to be in areas that can pick up that
Okay.
as well.
So if you look at number 8, which is the one that you've got circled there at the end of runway 1, left and right, that is actually, that's right at the end of a runway. And we have learned that backblast noise doesn't actually operate in a straight line. It actually operates in a big, now when I'm talking to people, I try to say it's like looking at a sandstorm. And the noise, the engine takes off, and this billowous cloud, although it's invisible because it's noise, goes off into an area. So I'm going to posit to you that the monitors that are set up to try to direct line of sight are not catching the noise that everybody is experiencing. Now, I'm more familiar with the noise that's affecting the cities that are adjacent to the airport, but that same theory could be worked on the noise monitors anywhere else. Noise does not run in a straight line. It runs in a bubble. I don't have the best terms for describing it. And when we get to ground-based noise, we'll talk about some of the graphics that could help explain this. So I'm just a little concerned with direct line of sight, especially on 8, which I'm very familiar with. Now, you also said that 8 is essentially at the close end of the 65 dBL. But that actually isn't true, because according to the current maps, there are only 3 homes in Millbrae that would qualify for any activity under the current guidelines. And those 3 houses are actually 3 blocks in, closer to the airport than where that 8 is. So if it is true that 8 is right at the edge, then by far more houses in Millbrae should qualify for the Second Chance program.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
I've got a few
And
more
so-
questions that are follow-up on this.
Oh,
So, I disagree with your comment that we have more monitors than we need. I'm very scared. You cannot do good science if you don't have enough monitoring devices.
And I'm going to interrupt you just real quickly, only because he's the messenger. He's not, and so he's
and we've
not
got an
saying
audience
that
and we've
that
got
for
people on
because
TV.
we have lots of other noise monitors that are going to be installed for sure. He said that would be the minimum that would be required for the satisfactory. Okay, you can do that then.
Thank you. Okay, the other problem with this contour is it only takes in the average flights over a period of time. So if it's a year, it's taking in the typical flight pattern. It's not doing the flight patterns for, where's my notes, alternative flows. Now, on alternative flow days, which may not seem like that many, those airplanes take off directly over Millbrae and directly over Burlingame, and they are completely absent from this chart completely. They're ignored. They're not counted. They're discounted. Anybody in that pattern.
I don't believe that's the case. I did not do these contours. I will state that, but I do know how contours are run, and it is using a full year's worth of operations. If they operated in the other flow, they have those in there. And both I need to reiterate, I can't, and I think Elizabeth started iterating this pretty well, is that all I'm doing is telling you about what Title 21 is. I don't disagree that you could have monitors where people are more affected by the noise, but that's not the purpose of the noise monitors per Title 21. The purpose is to define the contour.
What I'd like to see at the next working group and at the next ground-based noise, that we have a discussion of California's Title 21 because it needs to be modified. If we're simply following the current legislation as it exists, it needs to be changed to reflect what's truly happening. And by taking those alternate flow flights and averaging them in over a year, you basically have a contour that discounts them entirely. Which means the only way we can fix it is to fix Title 21. We have Senator Hill and several Assembly member staff here. That message has to go back to our Sacramento representatives that we need to change Title 21. It is the only thing that will protect us. Certainly the FAA will not.
I'm not sure that you're exactly right about Title 21. I think it's a larger conversation about the CNEL and the measurement of that level of noise, how it's measured and over time. I'm going to open it up for Carol to make her comment.
My comment is brief, and it had to do with what Mike was saying before. I think one of the reasons why some of these planes don't show up in the contours here is because they're below 65 CNEL, that when they pass and it's not as intense as it is when they take off and land, that they wouldn't show up because they're not relevant to that measurement.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other members have a question? Yes, Supervisor Pine.
Just a comment, maybe following up on Ann Schneider's point. I mean, Title 21 was, I believe, put in place long before federal law was changed to state that essentially FAA has complete control of planes in the air.
Right.
So in some ways, Title 21 is arcane now, and if you try to read it in light of the kind of current federal law, it's kind of baffling. So I think if I were the Caltrans Aeronautic Division, I'd be talking to Mr. Hill and Mr. Mullen about trying to make this law more aligned with the existing realities. I mean, it implies that we have powers that we don't.
No.
That's the problem with it. Is if you just pick that up, you get excited. You think that we can do all these things, but we still can't.
Okay. Carol, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, briefly. I agree with you, except Caltrans isn't allowed to speak to the Assembly members, but the Assembly members could speak to Caltrans.
Okay. Thank you, Jean. We have one public comment on this. Peter Grace from Brisbane. And, oh, Robert, you snuck in, you sly devil. It's true. Okay. Nice job, Jean. Yeah. Peter? I know that, do you have your green cord? That was a good visual last time. Here you go.
I'd like just to reiterate it again, that the level at which the noise monitor threshold is put determines the number of noise events. You have a high threshold, very few noise events. Low threshold, many more noise events. So what I'd like to start with is what we're talking about, the public understands noise events. The public does not understand this 65 CNL boundary.
What I want to talk about is Title 21, and while Dave Pine feels it may not be necessary, I believe it does have a point, and I believe that I will say again that at the end that we need technical work. We need this discussed at the technical working group because it's far too complicated for here. I do want to take some suggestions about and thank Jean for talking. One of the things that Jean suggested was that SFO has got exemptions for all the noise monitors. This is not correct. If you look at your director's report, you will see there are 28 noise monitors listed. SFO has got exemptions applied for 12 and got exemptions for 11. That means they were allowed to go and move from the state standard of 55 to 65. There is no concern about that whatsoever. The concern is about what is the thresholds for these monitors here, the ones that are outside. And I want to know why these monitors have been set to 65, no exemptions. The state standard is 55. Why has this happened? One of the things that I believe was sent was the quarterly report from San Diego. Was this sent in the meeting package as an additional amount? Was it included?
I don't think that was included.
It was intended to be included, and maybe it got a bit late. But what San Diego has, it produces the quarterly reports. This is for the fourth quarter 2018. You will see on the back, and unfortunately I can't show it, the thresholds given for the noise monitors are less than, some monitors are less than 65. Why are we doing at SFO holding the noise monitors at 65 and not lower?
Okay, Peter, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Can I just make two more points?
As long as there are 30 seconds.
I agree this should be a subject, this is complicated, it's subject to a technical working group meeting. And secondly, and this is really important, these reports, these quarterly reports that are sent, as the county has an auditing and enforcement role as defined in Title 21. It cannot be devolved to somebody else. The county is responsible.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Robert?
Hi, Robert Holbrook. I'm a resident of Mountain View. This stuff isn't going to benefit me one bit, but I think it may benefit people who are near those contours. If those contours are what's being used to give funds to people who can upgrade their houses to improve their windows or insulation, that matters to those people very much. If these contours are defined too narrowly, and by defining them more correctly, just hypothetically, we got another 1,000 people that could be included in these programs, that counts. The other reason that I think they count is because we do have just jurisdiction, I believe, over land use planning. And so standards that California or the county set are in fact used for making decisions about buildings and appropriate land use. And so getting this right does matter. It's not something that we have to delegate or allow to be subsumed by the federal government. And California is progressive in terms of some of these things. Now, we know that the FAA is being asked to produce studies of new metrics that are alternatives to DNL that might take into account the number of incidents, not just the average over the course of 365 days, but the number of incidents on any specific day, or perhaps better yet, during a specific period. And if we were to get better metrics for a better Title 21 that captured human annoyance better, we can make better decisions about what kind of buildings should be close to these airport boundaries. So I believe this is important. I think having looked at this a bit, I think there's probably a dozen ways that one can put the thumb on the scale here, and Peter has alluded to a few of them. The county's role in auditing these results, to me, seems like an important thing, and we should be asking if the counties are in fact fulfilling their obligations under Title 21. So I think this is a good topic for Ms. Schneider to be pursuing and for our Senator Jerry Hill's office to be looking into, something that could impact people's lives in a very, very important way. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Glad you spoke up. Okay, Jean, yes? Parting comments?
Yeah, there was just something said that these contours could be used or are used for funding purposes. Actually, the FAA prohibits these from being used for that purpose. You can only use for funding of sound insulation programs the federal contours, and Bert alluded to that a little bit earlier, is that there's a state contour and there's a federal contour, and they're not necessarily the same. And in fact, the state contour relies on noise measurements to determine where the contour is, to validate it. The federal requirements do not allow measurements to be involved in the determination of the contour. So I just want to raise that out there, that federal funding of these sound insulation programs are not based on Title 21 contours.
Oh, thank you for that information.
Through the chair.
And
Through the
yes,
chair.
Terry, Brisbane.
So I just wanted to comment that I was made aware of the San Diego report that I did forward to the Roundtable office. It went to you about 4 hours after the packet was published, and so it did not make it into the packet. But I think that looking at this report, it really addresses a lot of the concerns in the Flying Jesus area that we have, which is basically the area that has the most impacts, the constant noise impacts. The rest of us have noise events that really affect our quality of life. And I think that how it was just said that we need to try to find a way to capture the human annoyance and the health impacts that the random flights and now the very railroaded flights have in our area. And that's what affects most of these people that aren't in this specific contour. But the report that San Diego does have and does look like it's been signed off by their county seems to give us more data than our pretty and fluffy and documented report that we get. It has more raw data, and it shows how many people are impacted, what flights have those impacts, gives flight numbers, where they're going, where they're coming from.
Thank you.
And so I think it's a really important tool that we may want to look at and see if we can get a report that mimics this and may address some of the concerns in that flight pattern, and then figure out if we can have a report like this that encompasses the rest of the area.
So maybe this could be included in our next technical working group meeting?
I think that would be a great idea.
For that kind of deep dive and discussion in it. And I'm sorry it didn't make it into the packet.
Oh, I understand. It was late in arrival.
Okay.
We
Thank you,
can put
Terry.
it online.
Right, thank you.
All right, I'm going to close this item and open item number 9, presentation by Rul Kajar about the new monitoring system. Did I butcher that? I've got a lot of feedback on my. You have yours turned on? I don't know. Bert,
Yes, ma'am.
all up to you.
Well, I believe we're going to talk about Brule and Care.
Okay.
So we did end up making a selection finally with our noise monitor replacement and system upgrade. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Greg Bracci, who is the America's president? Vice president, sorry. And have an updated presentation? Oh, you should. But anyway, you need a digital laser pointer. You push the center button there, forward and reverse or below. Okay.
Thank you very much, Bert. Very much appreciate it. Thank you to the Roundtable at the opportunity. As Bert said, we're in the process now of upgrading and installing a new noise monitoring flight tracking system here around San Francisco International Airport. Very excited at the opportunity to do it. As Bert indicated, my name is Greg Bracci. I'm the Vice President of EMS Brule and Care. And what we wanted to talk about today was the system itself and kind of talk a little about some of the new features. One of the things you'll see with this new system is a lot of new public-facing tools that will hopefully be able to provide additional information and give people the ability to see some of the stuff, answer some of the questions that we've heard over the last number of roundtable meetings as well. So very, very briefly on our company, we're globally based in Melbourne, Australia. I'm based in Sacramento. That's where our North American headquarters is based. Title 21 was just discussed, certainly from Gene Rindell at length. This system that we're putting in has been certified to Title 21 numerous times in the past. And so part of the installation of the system, once it's finally installed, will be the certification of the system to California Title 21.
Excuse me, does San Diego use you?
San Diego International Airport does use our system, yes. And they went through a similar upgrade program last year.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yep. So a couple of things that I'll talk about, and then, like I said, we're going to focus a lot on some of the new community-facing pieces. We're going to talk a little bit about the noise monitoring terminals. Gene really focused on the Title 21 aspect of the noise monitoring terminals, but there's a lot of really innovative things that the airport does here. Bert and Dave and the team, when you talk about portable noise monitoring and being able to take monitors, in non-traditional places, that's something they've done in the past, and part of this upgrade is actually allowing that to continue as well. So I think it's a really good thing. But fundamentally how these systems work is you have the noise data coming in. You have, it's FAA sourced swim radar data feed that's coming in as well. So you have all that data coming in to the system. And then there is, if you see here, this is basically, we had talked about the thresholds and the exceedances. This is fundamentally how it works. When there's an aircraft that goes near a noise monitor, if it makes a noise level and it's within a proximity that it could have made that noise, it actually correlates that flight track and that noise event together in the system. And then that is stored in the system, and then a whole bunch of different, calculations can be done based on that, and analysis can be based on a correlated event or correlated flight track. So, and then up here you'll just see this is kind of the system here is a large number of flight tracks, a large set of data. You can actually do a lot of the analysis as well on the system. If we talk about the noise monitoring terminals, so certainly there's a number of noise monitoring terminals. All of the noise monitoring terminals are getting upgraded. So in addition to the 4 that Gene talked about, there's well over 25 noise monitoring terminals that are all being upgraded as part of this over the next couple of months. In addition to that, there's portable noise monitoring terminals. And so, this is something that San Francisco International Airport has done for many, many years, is taking portable noise monitoring measurements. But a credit to them, when they went out for this RFP, they said, we want to be able to provide more information to the community. We want to be much more engaging. So instead of just being able to create a report and then give you a report once the portable measurement is done, we want you, whatever vendor selected, to be able to provide that data in much more real time to the community. And so part of this is the ability to have apps and other devices, other mechanisms to actually share the noise data, if you will, when portable noise measurements are taken. And I think that that's a credit to, and again, so you'll see some of the things that they've traditionally done, they're doing a lot more, and this was really driven by them and their expertise and kind of the forward thinking. So I think there's a lot of credit that belongs to the team. All of the noise monitoring data, again, is integrated with the flight track data, as we discussed. And although the noise monitors traditionally take, noise LEQ measurements, it's the equivalent noise level that then correlates to a CNEL, these things do measure all types of noise and all types of parameters. So I know there's been a lot of different topics about, backblast noise and other noise, and the system isn't set up and configured to measure that as you see it, but portable noise monitors, there is ability in the system, in the portable noise monitors, to measure additional parameters. So, and then there's a couple of different community-facing apps and portals that we're going to talk about here today. So the first one, which will be launched within the next couple of weeks, is what's called the WebTrack public web replay interface. So the idea behind this is that it will actually have the flight track information and the noise monitoring information that the public can go to and look at. And you can actually do a number of things with this tool. So the first thing that you'll see is that it will do, so here's a couple of screenshots that we have of the system, but you'll see that there's actually, you get information from the airport about runway closures, other things that are going on, that can actually be put directly on the site here. You'll notice there are all of the circles you'll see. It's a little difficult to see, but these are all the noise monitoring terminals. And then you have color-coded tracks, because certainly with the airspace here, you're going to get a lot of traffic from Oakland and other airports. So it color coordinates it to say, is it local, origin, destination, departures, arrivals, or is it an overflight that might be going to and from a different airport? So the other thing, one of the really neat features that a lot of the community like to use is what's called point of closest approach. So you can actually put your address in the system, and then you can say, how close was that aircraft to my address? And then what it does is, you see it'll pop up a little screen here that actually gives you the dimensions on how close that actually was. You can store your address in there. The idea behind this is to get a lot of information that's really relative and pertinent to your specific location. So you can see the red is the arrival, so here's the entire arrival track. So you can actually look at the track as it goes out away from the airfield as well to see how it was coming in. It also gives you a flight tag ID, so there's a bunch of information relative to altitude, arrival destination, all that, what type of aircraft it is, Boeing 737 or such. So all that information is available in the system. And the other interesting thing it does is that you'll see some of the noise monitors will actually change shape depending on if there was a noise event that was correlated with that aircraft. So that happens not in real time, that happens after the fact, but if it was correlated, it actually tells you, and it gives you that visual information to say, yes, that was actually a correlated event versus just an event in the community that actually happened. From the system itself, you can actually go back and you can look at historical information. So if you'd like to, you can actually go back and say, okay, what happened yesterday? What happened last month, last week? You can pull that information up. It loads all the tracks. It loads all the noise data. And then you can actually play that as it's going through the system. The other thing you can do is you can actually look at and try to get additional information, including providing a noise report to the airport from the system. So you can actually click on it, and then you can put your information in, and it actually ties it to that aircraft. So if you have a specific aircraft that you see, and you go in the system and you select the aircraft, you can then go, and when you send the noise report, it'll actually tag that aircraft that you sent the information in. And then one of the next steps, and again, a lot of credit goes to the SFO team, is that this is, a WebTrack, and these tools have been out in the community, but actually looking at taking it the next step. So there's actually going to be a new community information portal that's going to be released later this year. And there's a couple of differences between WebTrack that we just looked at in this new community information portal. But one of the big things is it's going to give you specific information relative to your community where you live. If you live on an arrival path, you care about an arrival path, you want to know what's going on in your community. If you live in Pacifica or somewhere else, you might care more about what's going on in that community. So the idea behind this is it'll give you specific, community-specific information, but it'll also still tie in noise information, flight track information, and all that will be tied into the system and made available.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that was my presentation.
Great. We have a number of public speaker cards, so maybe we should let the public speak, and then I'll bring it back to the roundtable for comments at that point. Does that sound reasonable? So we have, and so we'll let the public ask questions or speak on this, and there's no more speaker cards? Well, okay. Just give me a piece of paper. We don't need them. That's okay. So we'll move on. This is a very interesting and exciting topic. I think one of the questions that people are just dying to ask is, are these new monitors going to go back in the exact same positions as the current monitors are and have been for years and years? Or will there be an evaluation of where is the best location for noise to be monitored? Bert?
I'm afraid this one's mine.
Okay.
Yes, the contract was let for the system to be a direct replacement. So, the slide that you saw earlier that Gene put up there is under the aircraft arrival and departure pass. Now, that said, there are communities outside that have monitors that wanted them. Years ago, they got them. And I'm going to be the first to stand aside and let you have the fight with them on whether it goes away or not, because I don't want to do that. A community that gets a noise monitor is not going to be first to let it go. Now, communities that want a noise monitor that do not have a noise monitor today, as Greg was mentioning, we're getting 8 portable noise monitors. We have a permanent portable noise monitoring program going on in a few communities right now. They like it. And for the state of California under Title 21, if you monitor in the same location for a minimum of 10 days, and you do that during the course of a year, it is equivalent of a permanent noise monitor. And you can average that CNEL in and use it. We're more than happy to fold in communities that would like to be in a noise monitoring program like that, rather than have to buy in with a $30,000 noise monitor. Much more affordable, much more equitable, and much more rapid to get it. Once these arrive, we can just set up a program, start deploying them.
Okay. I don't have an answer to that. I mean, I think basically everybody here, including, Councilmember Michael Neal and everybody who's made comments, there's certain noise monitors that clearly are out of date and in the wrong position. And they need to be changed out. Some evaluation has to be made in a reasonable manner to determine where the new noise monitor should be installed. I'm just saying, maybe we need to form a task force of, representatives to work with you on that.
Well, we have the minimum that we need to with 8, 12, 4,
You mean the
and
4 that
16.
was
Those
there?
4, yes.
Well,
And then those are minimum required.
for Title 21, but not for all the other noise events that we need to have.
Now, like I said, those are community noise monitors. Those are ones that communities request. We do have 2 noise monitors that are in flux right now, actually 3. We just found out about another one that we hadn't planned on. Site 2 is out the San Bruno Gap, is actually a good sideline site for monitoring that noise. We lost that due to trees growing up in the area. We recently negotiated with San Bruno and PG&E to find out if we can cut the trees. And I believe we're going to get the answer for that and see if we can proceed with reactivating that site during this upgrade. Site 15 in the Oyster Point Marina validates right at the edge of the bay there. The noise in South City at the edge of the bay I mentioned. We had it mounted on a restroom facility. They are renovating that area of the park and tearing that facility down. So they said, but if you'd like, you can go just down the way here, a short piece, put it on another one. We agreed to that. So we're keeping that site as a valid site. The one that is most local to us is in Burlingame here. We found out that 2 parcel owners, private property owners, were swapping parcels due to the proximity of one benefiting the other, and they agreed, well, we thought we were on school property. We weren't. We were on private property. And so that one is totally up in flux right now. We need to move it because the property owner is kicking us off. So in Burlingame, it is actually a good backblast validation site, but I'm going to leave it up to Burlingame whether it stays in the same general area or they have a better location for it. And I'm sure Burlingame would be happy to work it with the Roundtable.
Maybe I should just bring it back to the roundtable members. Do you have ideas about how we should best proceed? I mean, should each individual jurisdiction, city, go back to their council and their communities and look at if they have a noise monitor already in place? Do you feel that that should just be replaced with an upgraded noise monitor, or do you think that there might be a better location? I don't know how, the simplest thing for you in the noise office and the new consultant is to just go plunk a new one in the existing spot. But I don't think that that's something that everybody wants. Ann, and then Mike.
I would think at minimum, this should come to the ground-based noise ad hoc committee. I think we're meeting in the next 10 days and talk about location specific for that type of noise.
I think
and
that's
see
a
what
good
that group
idea.
makes.
I think that's a good idea. Mike, do you have a comment?
I would just like to comment, at least in Pacifica, the people that are where the present noise monitor is are happy because there are fewer and fewer airplanes. But 10 miles down the road, those people are upset because, so I think in Pacifica, we need either a second one or the one that's there relocated.
Relocated?
Yeah, I mean, if they could relocate them or a second one or the other. Because the people, it seems like the people that are being affected now are totally different than the people that were before.
Okay.
And I think that's what we're hearing from a lot of the public.
Okay. All right.
And through the chair, just real fast to Ms. Schneider's point, ground-based noise will act, and I'll clarify this when Justin does the summary, it will actually be in September. I was putting feelers out for August, but unfortunately, just not going to work. So I'm going to have to redo a polling. So
okay.
Again, I'll cover that in a few minutes.
And the
when we get to that.
technical working group is also going to be in September. Okay. Let's open it up for public comment right now. We'll when are you ready to implement with this?
We're in the process of going now.
Well, Bert, oh my gosh.
We discussed this when we brought it to the roundtable. It was going to be a direct replacement.
I know.
And there was no comment at the time, so we proceeded with the contract.
Yes, yes.
Because Elizabeth ended.
Through the chair.
Yes, Ann.
I think to the question that that Elizabeth was just getting at, Bert, it'd be useful to understand what publicity you're going to do for this, so that our residents are aware of it, because it looks like it's a super powerful tool. I mean, there's a lot more data here that our expert aviation residents in our communities, as well as all of us, obviously, would benefit from understanding how best to recommend to our constituents how to use it.
There definitely is. In fact, Greg was chomping at the bit to tell more and more and more. It's like, well, let's wet the stone right now. We'll go forth as we have things, and we can let people loose on them. So I'm hoping in our next roundtable, WebTrack's going to be up with the online forum where people can send it right into us. And when you see that web address up there, you can start using it right now in the room. That's my hope. So I think with the progress we're doing right now, we'll be there. And as these other tools like Insightful that he didn't mention the name of, and a few others, we will have much more. We're excited for you to have these tools. And the other benefit of it, it's going to help you help us, because there are far more of you out there in the community than there are of me and my staff. So the information that we get as feedback, the more details, the more information you give us, it's very helpful.
Okay. I think good data is important, and if the noise monitors are placed in the wrong position or, an outdated position, you're going to get bad data. And I think that is a critical thing, a critical decision. Mike, one more time.
I know, I was just wondering where we're at. Is there a subcommittee? Is
Well,
sitting-
I like Ann's idea about bringing it to the ground-based noise, and I'm sorry Ricardo's not here, because I think he also has some comments about where it's positioned, you know, from Burlingame, right? And but if the train's left the station and you're out there ripping old ones out and installing the new ones tomorrow,
Not necessarily. Like I said, with the portables, we can do a permanent portable program where if a community decides, hey, location A is not good, we think B is better, well, we leave A where it is right now, we take the portables out to B, we go do the measurements. Now, first quarter, we find A and B are identical.
okay.
Second quarter, we find B is a little higher than A. Third quarter, A is higher than B. That's one of the beauties of doing it this way. We can start figuring out, are we really in need of, or are we capturing the noise with what we have?
Okay, I think Justin wants to make a comment.
I was just going to say that I think that's the beauty of the portables is you're creating a dynamic situation. So instead of always saying, well, let's move a permanent to another location, you're on the fly just being able to deploy something, and you're getting the same information that your permanent is getting, especially, you know, Greg was saying that it's all live. So it's all streaming in live now. So it's not like in the past where their portables are deployed, you have to bring them back, crunch the numbers, it takes weeks, you get a report later on. This is all being fed into the same system, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that does sound exciting. It sounds like it's got a lot of bells and whistles. Does that seem reasonable to people? I mean, I know, shall we just go ahead and kind of go forward that way? Yes. No, not yet.
A quick question here.
No, but I mean, just, yeah.
I have a quick question.
Sure, Al.
You said there's a direct replacement. Does that mean every single existing monitor will be replaced?
Yes.
Yes,
So
with
we
the
have
exception
50s.
of the three I mentioned.
Okay.
So we have Site 11 here in Burlingame that needs to move. Could be 10 feet. It could be within the radius that would validate. We also have 15 moving slight amount. And then we have 2, which we're hoping stays exactly where it is. We're just allowed to trim the trees back.
And I assume the cost of installation is nominal, so if we determine later that the permanent location that exists today is worthless to us, we could move the permanent one?
$30,000.
No, that's the cost of a new one. What does it cost to move it?
$30,000.
$30,000?
And going up.
So the
old
determination,
cost.
so if you're replacing where they are today, and we determine that where they are today isn't the best place, we need to let you know as soon as possible, I gather.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
That's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that also involves a new contract.
Well, maybe
Okay.
a change order. Justin has a question.
I just have a question for Bert. If you could just explain what the process is for the permanent portables, how does that work?
It's quite simple, really. We work with the city council, the city manager, make arrangements for a site that's secure. We'd like to have someplace where we can at least lock it up, because they're expensive units to have walk away. We like to be certain that it's, again, as Gene mentioned earlier, not near roadways, not near railways, things like that. Has to be a relatively quiet area, preferably residential. And then we prefer to have power, someplace to plug it in. Makes it easier on us rather than having to do battery swaps. And then we pick a date and make sure it works with the calendar for the other programs and go.
Can I have a follow-up?
Yes, sure.
Okay. I was just wondering, is there a way that those locations or people requesting that could go through the roundtable as like bringing that information, like here's the pool of people that, you know, the locations, and maybe these are the ones we should focus on that are, you know, a hot area?
Sure, we can try that. The one issue that I've run into with that is that I like to have city council or city manager buy-in of some sort, because we've also had somebody come along and say, well, that neighbor is lying to you, and my house is worse than theirs is, and it gets into one of the he said, she said. So yes, I like to have it done through official channels.
Okay.
Through the chair?
Yes, Ann.
Okay, so going back then, since we're doing questions, you said that the permanents do not pick up low-frequency noise, but the portables do.
They're the same unit.
It's the same unit. So, and there are 8 permanent portables?
There are 8 portables
8 portables that could become, quote, permanent.
that we can dedicate to that
And have we
program.
agreed that at least some will wait for the next ground-based noise so that the ground-based noise group can talk about what parameters for the siting of those would include? Because one of the things that we've talked about is the directionality of low-frequency noise. So just plopping a monitor where the existing ones are may not be capturing the noise that we're trying to figure out.
Well, low frequency is non-directional.
I'm sorry?
Low frequency noise is non-directional.
Exactly.
That's, yeah, she's,
Exactly,
that's what
which
she
is
said.
why would like to have this discussion at the next ground-based noise, but I don't want to see that all 8 have been permanently assigned. In which case, if a city was choosing to purchase more of their own, what would be the cost?
We'd have to discuss that.
I mean, yes, it would be expensive, but when you're talking about people who cannot sleep, what's the value of sleep?
We do ad hoc noise monitoring for individuals right now. Happy to do that.
Okay. Supervisor Pine.
Maybe just a point of clarification. We're procuring 8 portables, that you said, right, in this program?
Yes.
And isn't a portable always a portable? It's deployed at a spot for a certain period of time and then moved somewhere else? Or there's a suggestion that it's only a portable for a period of time and then somehow becomes permanent?
Permanent portable, we have both ad hoc and we have permanent portable. So ad hoc noise monitoring is where John Smith calls us, says, hey, I want a noise monitor.
Okay.
We go out to his backyard, monitor for 10 days, 2 weeks, pick it up, done.
We always will need to do that. Right.
Agreed.
Okay, and then the other part?
Now, the permanent portable program, such as the one we have going in Brisbane, we have 2 locations there. Once a quarter, same point in the quarter, 4 times a year, we appear, plop it down, same exact location. I mean,
You don't leave it there for the whole year.
no, we leave it there for 10 days, 2 weeks, typically 2 weeks. I mean, I could spray paint circles where the legs of the tripods are, come back every quarter and put it in the exact same spot. That's the way it goes. I mean, that's the way the program's run.
And then you get a year's worth of data if you do something like that.
Right, and it can be averaged into an annual CNEL, just like the rest of the sites.
I'm just going to say, basically, the average CNEL, that whole thing needs to change. But that's not a discussion for
That's not where we are right now,
So
but we
I
deal
would
with
like
what
to
we have.
Open it up for public comments. We can take this to ground-based noise, and we can take it to our technical working group, because we're way getting late. And there's a ton of people here that want to speak on this, and I am hopeful that y'all can make it, okay, as quickly as possible. And if you have, if other speakers are saying exactly the same thing, I just say, I agree with that other speaker. So first, we're going to call Darlene Yapley, Palo Alto, then Peter Grace, and then Rojas from Oakland.
I would encourage you to look at what you want to monitor, not what you have monitored and what you are monitoring. We all know that NextGen created something new, so to measure like what we just looked at Part 150, I mean, hello, that's not going to solve any problem. So, I mean, I know you're all happy that you have a monitor if you have one, but does it advance the cause? I think you have to ask yourself that question. I think there's a couple principles. Noise should be monitored in locations close to the airport and locations not in the traditional 65 DNL, CNL noise contour, but that are impacted by both arrivals or departures, as evidenced either by the number of complaints or by SFO noise monitoring data already that they have. And this should also include those of us that are not at this roundtable, because ironically, some of us are facing more than people here. So please consider that we need to look at where noise is happening. Ground noise where's the problem? Number two, the reporting must be standardized across locations. Reporting should include noise metrics such as Europe and data that is not the 65. We're making an argument we want different alternative metrics. Let's use them in our report. That's part of our statement. And we do need from SFO a roadmap of the process and an opportunity for, where the community is going to engage, also is where decision points are. I do remember Ivar mentioned it at the last meeting. We did not think that this was a done deal in any way. I mean, you can look back at the tape. He said, we're looking at this, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I had prepared these comments to actually ask for the process on timing so that we can make the strategic decision now that we all know what we know today.
Thank you. Peter Grace? Rojas, and then Peggy McLaughlin of Hillsborough, and Mark Schul of Palo Alto.
I wish Bert was here because I want to say this is extremely helpful to be able to tie flight track data with noise monitor data. This is the real improvement. The question for me is how it's used and whether it will now be able to reflect the experience of the communities on the ground, and also whether this app will allow you to actually push a button and say you're affected by a noise event right now. It would be nice if there was a function within this website to be able to do that. The question I've got to ask is about noise events, and it's really the consultant, it's how it's used. How close does the plane have to get before it's considered to be a possible noise event? That's really important. How long does the duration of the event have to be before it can be considered a noise event? Thirdly, what is the threshold of the monitor? Those three things need to be discussed, and I suggest they're put in a technical working group so we can understand what's happening. It's too complicated for here. As for suggestions of where to move monitors, I spoke several years ago about there's a monitor, as you can look on your graph here, there's a monitor in the northern part of San Francisco, number 27. When I looked at the noise events from that, they were from helicopters, news aircraft, and tourists from Hayward. I suggest that monitor's used, or Hayward pays for that monitor. And it's moved to somewhere that's more in San Francisco. It's moved to somewhere like Hunters Point, which is bombarded every morning by candle flights, vectoring early, and by Styx flights. They are the poorest and most underserved community, and as far as I can see, I've never seen a noise report from that area at all. We should be ashamed that we're not looking after this group. Thirdly, one of the challenges that Bert was doing with these portable noise monitors, they sit for 2 weeks and then they're moved. So the question is, how many locations can they fit in a quarter? Mm-hmm. That's the real question. I reckon 48 locations if they manage to get them out one after another. That's the question that should be answered.
Thank you, Peter. Rojas, then Peggy McLaughlin, and then Mark Schul. We have, I guess it's up there.
I'm excited about this new tool. I also want to sort of put a little caveat as a citizen that knows a little bit about data. This is data from a year. Just stopnoise.net and flight radar 24. This data is showing that all of these planes have been flying lower and lower over time. And yet, I have a report from Noise Abatement saying there has been no changes. So what I'm learning is that we can have all the tools that we want and all the data that we want, but if we don't change the metrics and we don't change how we're defining what we're assessing, we're going to get the same response that nothing has changed. Where in our experiential, everyday lives, a lot has changed. We can't sleep, we can't work, we can't do anything because we have to spend every 2 minutes reporting that there is a flight disturbance. So I just want to say that more data is great, but if we don't change our policies around where we're analyzing this data, I've seen data being manipulated to justify the decisions that we're making. I don't think that we're going to have any relief. So I hope that whatever Title 21 is, if it needs to be redefined, to be modernized, let's do that. The FAA, if they can lower the threshold for noise so that we can actually assess quality of life against noise, that we do that. But all of these tools are really not going to help if we don't change how we're analyzing this information. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy McLaughlin, and then Mark Schul, then Lilia Rowland, And then Lynn Israelet is our last one.
Hi there. I've been coming to the roundtable meetings for over a year, and I've heard about this upcoming new monitors. Bert, I'd like to ask you, when have you consulted this roundtable about these monitors? Because all the meetings I've been coming to, I understood, we have RFPs out. We can't talk about it. We have RFPs out. We'll let you know. So this is the very first time I have heard you ask for any input from the roundtable, and that is really pathetic, particularly if it costs $30,000 to place those in a particular spot. And I would also like to say, no, it's not up to town council to decide where to put them. It's up to a noise expert, whether it's Justin or somebody else, to help us figure out where to put those. So it's appalling that it has come to this.
Okay.
So I'd like to specifically ask two questions. One, I heard that the flights are connected to, or the sound can be connected to flights. That's great. We had that with stop jet noise. I heard that the system can be set up for backblast noise and is configurable for that. I did not hear it is going to measure backblast noise. Can you comment on that?
So, okay. Yes, very briefly. I do want to come to Bert's defense because last meeting he did talk about this, and we talked about it quite a while, and about that the contract was being signed. I said, anyway, so it's not the first time, but I've got lots of feedback here. So, Bert, very quickly.
Very quickly. 2 years ago, when we brought this to the roundtable, mentioning that we were going to proceed with letting a contract and an RFP to do this, was when we first did it. Now, your last question was the allowing an acoustical expert to set these sites. We have done that every time we've done this. Now, we're getting more input from the community and the roundtable that they want input. That's where I'm allowing that. So what we have right now was indeed set and verified by multiple firms, including Gene Rindell's firm, HMMH.
Great, if you got into it. That wasn't my question to you, Bert. My question to you was, is the system configured to...
That was the last question, yes, sorry. The system is dumb. You configure it to what you want out of it. And one of the questions that I have asked of Berlin Care already is, once we've established this to go and be certified for the state, I would like to develop a report for backblast noise.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm hearing it is not configured, and when is this process going to happen?
We have a certain amount of customizable reports that we're allowed to do, and I would like to do that in concert with the
So I'm going to
ground-based noise
interrupt
subcommittee.
because this is taking a lot longer than your allotted 2 minutes, and I think that we will be talking about it a lot more, and I don't want to grill Bert on that. Thank you. Yeah, understand. But he made it very clear, excuse me, he did make it very clear that it can be programmable for backblast noise when we put it in that area. So that's enough. Okay, Mark, and then Julia Rowland,
thank you
and then
very
Lynn
much.
Israelet.
Thank you for the presentation. One of the things that it did show was all of the places where the arrival tracks are, but one of the problems is that because they're in Santa Clara County, there are no airport noise monitors in Santa Clara County. And the other thing about it is the historic noise monitors, at least if the minutes are correct, were paid for by FAA AIP funds, but yet they're allocated only for the county, not based on impact. That doesn't seem quite right. And as far as Title 21, I really think that SFO really, you get rid of plastic, but you do legal minimums in terms of the monitoring that you do, and I think that is wrong. Also, if you just use portable monitors, all these advanced features, you get them for 10 days. And then, of course, you get a replay, I don't know. You can't use all the fancy stuff that was explained because the monitor has moved on to some other location. And the other thing I would finally say is, remind people again, the project at Stanford, the MONA project, which basically Palo Alto had the monitors for a couple weeks. So we set up really cheap, not $30,000 monitors, but sub $1,000 monitors, and got exactly the same results. And these are in the process of an idea to deploy these in more dense mesh, which is really what's going to be needed to be able to monitor accurately. And they can do C weighting for vibration. And I know the B and K monitors can do C weighting. It just has to be done for vibration. Thank you.
Thank you. Lilia?
Can I ask a couple of questions?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. If people apply close to a year ago for the inspection to look into the noise, what is it called, noise abatement program, and then they say, well, depending on the whatever code you leave, who do you ask that question, and how do they decide that?
So the installation. Yeah. We'd love to talk with you offline individually, because there is a line to call the airport, so it's not something that we need to discuss right now. So if you after the meeting, you come and we'll take that information for you.
Okay. And so then with this stuff that we've been talking about, the monitors and all that, how will it change when people say, I need a Windows, I need the noise abatement? Is this noise abatement program going to continue, or the monitors are going to replace it, or how is that going to play?
So again, we should talk to you directly offline about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Israelit? Burlingame.
Hi. I also have been attending almost every roundtable and ground-based noise subcommittee meeting. At the last ground-based noise committee meeting, Bert, you said you guys were putting out proposals for replacing the noise monitors, and there was a discussion that placing these noise monitors in the exact same spots where they were selected based on advice in the 70s does not make sense. We will get no new information. I don't understand why you would put $28,000, $30,000 monitors in the exact same places that they were in the past. When we have said over and over, something has changed, we want to measure this, we want to do this in a new way. And I don't understand the rush that these are suddenly, from the last meeting, going in without any input from the community, or not a great amount of input. I hear that you were surprised as well. So I think that's a little disingenuous, and I don't appreciate it. In addition, we have asked many times for a yes/no response. Will these monitors measure ground-based noise? I don't want to know if they can be configured. I want to know, will they be used to measure it? I understand the portables can. Is that correct? Yes or no? Same devices. Will they measure ground-based noise? Will we be using them to measure ground-based noise? I shouldn't have to coach my questions so detailed. Okay, great. And then I think that as far as the portables, I'm glad we have 8. That's wonderful. I do think that the placement of those should go through the roundtable and the communities and not be left up to SFO to make those decisions, especially since it sounds like the airport has decided to put these permanent ones in the same spots based on data from the 74 when those were put in? And is that something that can be changed, or is that a done deal? Permanent locations. Is there any input, or has the airport decided where they're going? I guess, once again, we don't have the answer. I'm sorry for being frustrated, but I think that if you ask a straightforward question, you deserve a straightforward answer.
I think that it's in process at this point. Okay, we're going to close this item, and we will continue the discussion at the ground-based noise meeting to be scheduled, and we'll get some more information. Oh, Did my thing go off? We're closing this item for discussion, and we're moving on to item number 10, which is the ground-based noise report from the ad hoc subcommittee of their meeting June 25th. Ricardo is supposed to give that, but he's not here. I'm wondering if any member from the meeting, Justin,
if
would you
you
like
want.
to do that? Okay.
Sure. I don't
Meeting
mind.
summary, just,
I was actually there, so I'm
Okay.
also quite happy to do it. I believe you called in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
well, I was
Actually,
going
we
to
had a-
ask if you wanted
Okay,
to.
we had a really terrific, and Councilman Medina from San Bruno was there.
And Marty?
Linda was also there. Linda was also there. So actually, as an ad hoc committee, this was our best meeting. We actually had discussion of various items. We talked about existing conditions, which is in the staff report. We talked about the types of materials that could be sound absorption or attenuation. We even talked about trees and the fact that, and Bert, please correct me if I'm wrong, that trees are one of the best devices for absorbing sound and not bouncing it around. And for the record, from transportation agencies over the last 20 years, from BART to Caltrain to the airport to the widening of 101 and to potentially high-speed managed lanes, every project reduces the number of trees in Millbrae. So over and over, we have had a tree reduction. I can't speak for the other cities. So that was actually one exciting piece of news, that maybe there is a natural way that can absorb carbon and potentially help with noise. The bad news is that there are 2 episodes of ground-based noise. The first is when the jet first starts taking off and you feel this wall. You feel it because it's also vibration. You feel that wall of sound. And then as it proceeds down the runway and then powers to actually lift off, there's a second blast. And that noise can bounce in interesting directions which we don't have good visuals. So we left the meeting with, and Mr. Councilman Medina, correct me, that we're going to get a better visualization of where this sound travels, how it travels, going backwards to old data to try to figure out if the old data shows examples of ground-based noise incidents. Actually, and I'm sorry, Councilman, you were also there. So we had a good discussion of where we need to create some of the historic data, as well as talking about the minimal ways to try to remediate it. But it's not hopeful on the remediation side. It might be better once we have a better grasp of data.
Any other comments from any of the members who attended? Okay, thank you very much, Ann. That was really good. The other item is item number 11, which we put on the agenda to open up to any roundtable member who, from their communities, are experiencing any kind of a ground-based noise event that you want to bring to the roundtable to discuss. So we have item number 11 to allow us to open that up for discussion, and if any other community is experiencing ground-based noise that you'd like to speak about at this time. Just that kind of an open-ended discussion. Seeing none, we'll close that, go on to item number 12. God bless you, Carol. Item number 12 is the departures bucket. Terry. The departures bucket. And we put the night hush procedure status on here. I know we talked about it quite a lot the last time with the FAA representative. One thing that we do have is an update. Jackie Spears' office received the NorCal update for July 2019 and did mention the night hush kind of summary status that the FAA has met with the San Francisco Airport and Oakland airports in May, and they discussed potential operational impacts of this procedure. So the San Francisco and Oakland airports are currently working with industry partners to ensure that they understand the request and the potential impacts. And So after they complete their discussions with the industry, the FAA plans to facilitate another meeting with industry to discuss operational impacts in further detail and to determine a path forward. So that's just the general summary. Kathleen, you provided this information for me. Do you have anything to add at that? Okay, all right. I'll ask the FAA, do you have anything to add to that? Okay, thank you very much. So that's kind of where we are with the night hush procedure. I'd like to open it up again to the roundtable members. Are there departure issues that your community is screaming at you about currently right now that is you'd like to just bring forward? Terry?
I will say that we have an ad hoc subcommittee in Brisbane that's a citizens group that we meet, and we've discussed the departures noise that really affects some of our northern cities. And we discussed an option for working within the technical working group and the next meeting and trying to get a spin-off, basically a subgroup, to work on those issues so that we can get a consortium on that. And I will be discussing that with the cities that are most affected by the ground-based noise and see if we can get a good, solid group to work in the subcommittee at the time of the technical group, which is
For the
what
departures,
staff had
yeah.
recommended.
And so you'll kind of coordinate with James so we can agendize that, or we'll just put a broad bucket?
I think that we're going to work on that and see if we can get a good, solid group of both cities and public members who are really going to know way more than I can ever know on some of these items and try to get that together for the next technical group.
Thank you. And Mike, you had your finger raised, and then Ann?
No, I'm
Okay.
fine. I was just going to see, you asked if people were complaining. I said, yeah, noise.
Oh, for departures?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Ann?
The city of Millbrae is very interested in continuing to work on departures. Typically, our departures are in the wintertime when people may have their windows closed, but with the new normal of fire season, during those bad fire episodes, the departures take off right over Millbrae and Burlingame, or potentially Hillsborough. So I think we're living in that new normal. Earlier, there were people saying the last 18 months, and I am curious to know, and I'm curious if the data systems can look at climate change. If we're having hotter, drier, lower humidity, is that another reason why we are all experiencing noise in a different way? And then I was thinking particulate matter. I'm also serving on a county emergency services particulate committee, and I'm not exactly up to how particulates might be affecting noise. But we're in a new normal now, and we should be looking at that new normal.
I'm not sure that we can do much about the particulate.
No, we can't do anything about it, but we can understand it. To me, if you understand the problem, you can't fix it if you don't understand the problem.
Okay.
But we
Anyone
have a
else?
definite increase in particulates.
Anyone else? Okay. I do have a speaker card for item number 13, additional matters, departures for Darlene Yapley. Okay, Darlene?
The July update from the FAA mentions the creation of the OAK procedure that flies down the bay during nighttime hours. Although this procedure is still in its initial feasibility stage, it's a recommendation that originated from the San Francisco Roundtable without any consultation so far from potentially affected communities. To best of our knowledge, there's no information available on the procedure details or the expected impact on Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale, just to name a few of the communities. We'd like to ask the FAA to review the proposed 050 procedure details and its expected impact on cities as soon as possible, especially communities outside of San Mateo and San Francisco. This should be well ahead of the publishing of the procedure on the IFP Gateway. The procedure would shift noise from communities near San Francisco and Oakland to mid-peninsula cities. And as was mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, the charter is not to shift noise, which has been a long-standing position. These departures occur at night, 2 to 3 a.m., which is the Oakland Federal Express departure, And Mid-Peninsula residents hear these 050 departures when they fly too low or too close to the residents on the western shore of the bay. So given the low ambient noise in our communities at night, the noise impact is quite hard. These departures wake up Peninsula, Mid-Peninsula citizens in the middle of the night. Please consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Darlene said, so I'll keep it short.
Okay, thank you.
But I do have one additional point.
That's good.
The additional point is that in looking at the work that you've done on it so far, you've labeled those 050 with climb outs over East Palo Alto, et cetera, as no impact because they're over the bay. But if you just look at track miles, the impact is probably similar to basically a flight going over Pacifica. And you probably believe that those departures over Pacifica are noisy. So you're essentially doing the same thing, just going around the other direction and about the same impact. So I think what I'm saying is this is something that should be coordinated with folks outside of the Roundtable boundary. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. No other speaker cards. I do have something that just jumped out at me, this came too late to be included into the packets, this update, but we can put it on the website, can we not, Kathleen? Okay, yeah, all right. There is a section, and I guess I'm going to posit this to the FAA since you're here, because you did an update about creating an Oakland departure procedure that flies down the bay during nighttime hours. It referenced all of the initiative pages and everything, but it's a little confusing to me, and so I'd like to read the status of it and then talk about it, see if we can have it at our next technical working group meeting, and we'll make sure that when we ask you your questions, we will include that specifically, because I think it needs, it doesn't, we haven't talked about this much, and I'm wondering where it came from and why it's now on your kind of priority list to do. In March 2019, the proposed action was entered into the IFP Gateway. This request received initial feasibility and regional airspace procedures team approval. The FAA anticipates a publication date sometime spring 2020. So I think we need a lot of conversation around that. If I can just kind of put you guys on a little bit of prior notice on that, okay? Thanks so much. So that does the departures. We will look at arrivals. Again, we have Pirate 2 status update, and the Pirate 2 update that came from the NorCal deal was that essentially, the FAA is currently evaluating a long-term solution to this issue. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the last sentence in the little paragraph about the Pirate 2 RNAV system. So they're still evaluating. I'm going to open it up. Anybody want to talk about arrivals? Are there arrival issues that your constituents are currently screaming at you about? Okay, then I'm going to open it up for public comment. Rebecca Ward, Palo Alto, and Karen Porter, Palo Alto. And Darlene Yapley.
The meeting that I talked about that the community of Palo Alto got up and spoke about was actually the Pirate change, right? It was a discussion about whether Palo Alto only remedy.
Right. You've already talked about this in the public comment period.
Right. But what I'm saying is, and this is my point, because we're not represented on the roundtable, when you got up and spoke about Pirate 2, you talked about all of the benefit that Woodside and Portola Valley would get. You didn't talk about the impact to communities down by the bay like Palo Alto. And so this is different in the fact that you don't shift noise overtly, but noise shifting happens because Pirate 2 has a 060 heading, which points it right at Palo Alto. We weren't consulted, we weren't part of it. You sent a letter telling us because we hosted the select committee, somehow that was our agreement with it. But my point is that you do actually move noise. The departures will move noise over Palo Alto. This moved more noise over Palo Alto. So to say that your MOU says that, in practice, that's not really what happens. And again, we have no representation on this, so our only hope was that the city would actually sue the FAA, and I don't think that's good for the FAA. I don't think that's good for anybody. So what I would encourage you to include Palo Alto, and I would encourage the airport to stop ignoring the problem. The reason none of you have big problems about arrivals is because they're all over Palo Alto, and we have no voice anywhere. Thank you.
Okay. Karen, and then Darlene.
So I was hoping to get more information about the progress, I use the term loosely, on Pirate 2. I am pretty much directly under Pirate 1, which moved the flight path, contrary to the FAA's stated principle of not moving noise. I know that, just I can experience looking at the planes that I really didn't used to see so many underbellies. I can tell it from my Stop Jet Noise app that a higher proportion are 1 to even 0 kilometers from my home. And so I really hope that the FAA will take seriously the imposition of all these additional flights in a concentrated flight path over not only Palo Alto, but East Palo Alto, which I live very close to. And I don't think there's, residents have the luxury of being able to attend all these meetings to speak to their own experience. So I would like to advocate on their behalf as well. And I really think that it is unfair that we don't have a seat at this forum, and yet we are disproportionately impacted by the intersection of 3 different flight paths over side by, as it's now called, and at lower and lower altitudes as well. I actually have a FOIA request to the FAA to ask for information about altitudes, and it's been 8 months now, and I'm, not holding my breath. But I think the altitude levels need to be addressed as well. And the information that was provided for Pirate, again, as the previous speaker mentioned, I mean, it ended at Woodside. Well, what happens after Woodside? It's a free-for-all, basically, over, east of Woodside. So we really need more definitive, clear information from the FAA about Pirate 2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Darlene.
Pirate 2 is somewhat implemented. I detected 2 last night when I was trying to go to sleep. The FAA stated they did not expect any increase in its usage. So I'm a data-oriented person. Please request the SFO show data that's before and after Pirate 2 so we can see the usage that's actually happening. I also request that you collaborate with the Santa Clara Santa Cruz Roundtable as they have members interested in the Pirate procedure and continue to seek answers from the FAA that the Roundtable has not received, which is what happens after the coming over Woodside all the way to landing at SFO. The cities most likely impacted are Portola Valley, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, and Los Altos. As you can see, they're split between the 2 roundtables, and it's important that given that we're all limited to 3 questions every 2 months, that maybe we can consolidate some of those questions and get more things accomplished. So that's what I would ask of you, that maybe we could team together and be smarter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Darlene, for making it brief. Okay. So that closes our public comment for the arrivals. We're going to go on to item number 16, which I think will begin to address some of the requests from Palo Alto residents about San Francisco Airport Roundtable coordinating with Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Roundtable, and also Oakland. We have been discussing, and maybe Supervisor Pine would be able to help me here a little bit, but as reported in June, I reported that I had reached out to the Oakland Forum co-chair, Benny Lee, especially in relationship to the night hush, and to coordinate. Very open to working with us in a more formal way. We've got a letter, a memo from the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Roundtable asking for us to liaison with them, to work with them in a more collaborative and formal way. My opinion is that we need to do that, and yes, we want to collaborate, and as Congresswoman's, well, she said after San Francisco and Oakland meet operationally, then the FAA is going to, especially the night hush will come back and will be able to work together on that. So I think that on a regional basis, we have an opportunity to form maybe another subcommittee or a super committee with the 3 airport roundtables to meet, because forming a whole body, you know, we can't all meet, all 40 of us or 60 of us together, but to have the FAA there to talk about how we can avoid stepping on each other's toes, right? When we want to solve a problem in San Mateo County, that we're not creating a problem in Santa Clara County or Oakland. So I think that that's kind of the next step. Do you have anything to add about the concept of that?
Well, there's certainly a need to coordinate across these 3 roundtable organizations. You know, it's one big airspace. All this is interrelated. I think it would be really productive if a representative from each roundtable, you know, an ad hoc group, were to come together and just think about how should we, what kind of processes and procedures should we put in place to make this coordination a reality. And with that idea in mind, I think Ann Weninger would be a great person to do it from our end, because she served on the Select Committee, and so knows all the folks down in Santa Clara.
Very well.
But it's a big need to figure out how we can coordinate. And I think in terms of how the airport supports the 2, particularly Santa Clara and San Mateo. These rivals affect both areas. So yeah, it's a big need, and I think, you know, Ann has done some thinking about it already. So sure she'd have some would represent us well.
Ann, do you have input?
I mean, I think this is an idea that was one of the top recommendations out of the Select Committee, which was the idea being that we would coordinate amongst the different regional airports and the groups that were representing them. And unfortunately, in 2017, that just dropped off the edge of the world when everything changed. And clearly, it has not gotten better. Clearly, the issues are more complicated, more complex. And I think the example of Pirate is a very good one, because it's one that's right in front of us now, and something where the coordination just on an immediate basis amongst these groups would be super critical. In my mind, it's always been to the benefit of all of us to come up with a regional solution, and one that really does look at all of the coordination between the various groups and the needs of those groups, because we're not going to succeed if we're not able to work as a group across the entire Metroplex. So I'm happy to tackle that if it works for the roundtable, to at least start the process, and then come back, obviously, to this group with some of the initial thoughts, initial recommendations, and sort of take it from there. I think it's a little bit of an empty palette right now. And so, but I think the idea being that it will potentially have some tremendous long-term benefits for everybody involved, most importantly, our residents.
Yes. And I think the immediate opening is a liaison to the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Roundtable, and they would reciprocally bring a representative to us we need, and I do believe that the Oakland Roundtable and Forum is open to doing the same. And so you would not be a member, a voting member. You would have opinions and voices. So, and do you vision just going to their individual roundtable meetings, or meetings separately with, the individuals to?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the kind of thing that Ann and her counterparts from
Should figure out.
think about, right?
Think about.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should think about it too. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an answer, because I think it really would depend on how well the groups would work together potentially, and I think obviously it would require a lot of coordination with them.
Any members have any comments about this? I'm thinking that you want to speak on item 16?
Yeah.
What we're doing here now? Okay. Yes, Tom?
Yeah, I do have a comment. I think that the idea of having a representative from both of those roundtables come, and vice versa, coming to the meetings and being a part of the meeting in one form or another, whether they're actually a member or whether they're just visiting, and that needs to be worked out. I think it's very important, and I think it would be very useful. I actually think that having one representative be a voting member would be useful, and that's something you guys should consider. That's just my own opinion. That everybody, Oakland has a voting member, and Santa Cruz has a voting member, and likewise the other way around with us. That may be one way to look at it. So just a thought.
It almost doesn't seem like one vote out of 25.
But at least it's a voice,
Yeah.
which is what's really important.
Yeah.
And it's the start of the coordination. I think, there's other ways to look at it, obviously, but it's important that we coordinate with them. It's very clear from listening to folks from Palo Alto, as an example.
Sure, yes. Ann?
I think that would be great. I think, Ann, you would be terrific. I have one question. If you hear that the other roundtables are working on issues that affect the cities right adjacent to their runways, I would love to invite them to our ground-based noise meetings, too.
I think that's a good idea for how we might there's, I think, initial steps and then the next level of discussion about how this could work.
Yeah, I think I forgot to mention that staff have been looking for other airports that are working with that type of noise, and the more, the better it will be.
Any other member have a comment on this? Roy, Al?
No, I would disagree with the comments made. I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure I agree with the voting member thing, but I do agree having them as ex officio member at least makes sense to me.
Anybody else have a comment? Carol?
I'm not sure a voting thing is necessary, because it seemed to be like a drop in the bucket. An opinion would be good, but I don't think that we should try to influence what they do, nor I wouldn't want them influencing what we're trying to do.
Well, I think I agree with you. I think that what it would solve is the exposure of inadvertent consequences, of us, trying to solve a problem, and even for the FAA to try to solve a problem that we're working on, and we don't, realize it's going to affect somebody else. And the ultimate decision maker is the FAA. Whether or not the procedure is going to work or not, or whether or not they're going to work with us on changing a procedure. So, I mean, we think we're all powerful, that we're going to, vote on it and it's done, but, we don't. So we kind of keep that in our head, we kind of think that we're, all powerful, but we're not. We can just make recommendations, and as far as working collaboratively. And if the body feels like, well, if it's going to move here and it's not really going to, impact our residents or whatever. So I think that we're taking the necessary baby steps on this. So, okay. I'll open it up to public comments and. Brief. Okay, Rojas, and then Darlene and Robert.
I just want to say, I mean, I'm the only Oakland resident here, so I want to speak for Oakland, and I really love the idea of some collaboration.
Yeah.
The reason I'm here is because I did go to the Oakland Roundtable, and FAA was there when I was there, and I was talking about this 40% flights flying over my house, and turns out they're coming from SFO. I live near the Oakland Zoo. It's going to take me an hour to get back home.
Oh my gosh.
To have my voice heard here. And I love the idea of having an Oakland representative have a vote, even if it's small, because, you know, Oakland residents are feeling, you know, this noise from SFO, and we can't go to the Oakland airport and say, what are you gonna do? And then we can't come here because we don't have a voice. So, and we're so far away, like I never thought that where we bought our home, we would have noise from SFO airport. So I just want to say that I think it's important that all communities, I feel for Palo Alto, and I've been following, you know, everything that they've been doing, that they have a voice at the table if they're being impacted by the issue. Thank you.
Okay.
Through the chair, just real fast, there was something I was going to mention before we went to public comment. In regards to the voting members, just for context, no one give me any dirty looks on this one, but we're all bound to a memorandum of understanding that each of your city councils have agreed to. And the memorandum is said that cities within the city and county of San Francisco and the county of San Mateo are what forms the roundtable. In order to add on any cities outside of that, the MOU has to be amended. And in order to do that, each of your city councils needs to adopt that. So that, just to add a little bit of history, that has always been sort of the sticking point when Palo Alto has requested that. And in the discussions of that, that's where the roundtable has, you know, decided that that wasn't the exercise to take on. So I just want to put that in context, that in order to open up for additional voting members outside of that area, the MOU would need to be amended.
Thank you for bringing us back to reality. It would take a little bit of time to do
I'm
that.
not, and I don't want to mention it to say no, it's just those are the
No, that would be
mechanics
the
of what it
process.
is.
Yes, okay. Richard, Robert and Darlene, did you already do? No, you didn't. Brief.
I don't know, maybe.
I feel like I'm in this altar, you know, I kind of turn into a pumpkin this late at night.
When we have this discussion about involving other roundtables and coordinating with them, I think the first thing we tend to think about is unintended consequences and shifting noise and the impacts on them. And it's all good that we should be having those conversations, certainly. But there's another opportunity that came to my mind as I was working on items for the work plan, which is now being solicited by the Santa Clara Santa Cruz Roundtable, because there's a lot of them. And that is along the lines of what was mentioned with regard to the ground-based noise forum. We've got a lot of things that we'd like to do, I think. You have a lot of things that you'd like to do. Oakland presumably has a lot of things that they'd like to do. Let's explore whether we need to do them 3 times or 1.5 times. Maybe we can do them once and share the information amongst ourselves and get some productivity gains out of coordinating amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Like it. Thank you. Okay, Darlene, final.
I was going to build on everything that's said, but I think that there is an opportunity to work on some projects, maybe just one project, like post-next-gen comparison to pre-next-gen, like flight data reports, like advocacy for new legislation. So we can't do all of those, or, you know, even people that are close to the airport. I know San Jose citizens have come to the roundtable in Santa Clara and voiced issues about that. So I would say, obviously, we want to avoid conflict with procedures, but there is tremendous heavy lifting that we all have to do, and I think there's great opportunity on maybe 1 or 2 shared projects that could really make a difference, and we could have more influence and impact and share our knowledge and our agility on what we've learned.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer Sunnyvale, this is the final. Public comment period is going to be closed after this.
Yes, I'll be very brief here. Basically, I'm kind of voicing the same things that Robert and Darlene were saying, except that I think it is very important to have maybe the multiple roundtables meeting as far as legislative sorts of things that we're trying to accomplish. For example, let's look at SST, the supersonic. You know, to work as the 3 roundtables, maybe even nationally with the other roundtables, so that we have a single voice. against certain things. The DNL, that we're pushing changes in DNL, pushing dispersion technology, which is what NextGen does not do. It concentrates. So if we can disperse again. So something that we can work together kind of nationally with multiple roundtables. Just kind of a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you all. Thank you all. Lots of good discussion, lots of good input, lots of good thoughts. Going on to item number 18, I'll just make it, item number 17, technical working group items discussion. I think we got a lot of information.
Yes, so I was just going to quickly dive into that. I've got a number of items that will be going into a technical working group meeting. So that being said, we're looking at September for that. I will be reaching out to roundtable members to see who would be interested in participating on that, because it's been a while since we've had members participate in it.
Okay.
Poll them on.
Say a date?
Not
No.
yet.
I will
He's
poll,
gonna
I will poll,
Yeah.
but it will be probably in September. So that's all I have on that
Item
one.
number 18, thank you, James. Glossary and website resources. James is
And-
going to talk to you about the little handouts and,
Yeah, so that's now available on the Roundtable website. We're still adding terms to it. I know Ann Schneider has provided a number of items that are ground-based noise related that we'll be putting into that glossary. So just to save a little bit of paper, I'm no longer putting that into the packet, but it'll be available on the website. And we'll perhaps maybe have a couple of copies here in the meetings just to have access to. But we will be adding that. For example, GBAS was not on there, as we just kind of found out as we were ready to point to it. We'll make sure that's on there, as well as, again, a number of the terms
new
that Ann has
technology?
provided on that. So that's all I have on item 18.
okay. Aviation noise, news and updates, Justin?
Do we want to just maybe put that online?
Yeah. Okay.
For members to review. The other thing I was going to mention is James and I will further discuss it, but maybe just me getting that presentation to him sooner so he could maybe include it in the packet
Oh, good.
for informational purposes, because it seems like we don't
Yeah.
ever get there anymore, so
It's on my
it'd be
fault.
nice.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yep.
Did you want to say something else?
No,
I
it
cut
was
you.
okay.
Okay, all right. Item number 20, any member communications or announcements? Terry?
It's not really a communication or announcement, but I would like to request that we get an update on the noise health effects study that has been promised for forever.
From the congressional?
The congressional studies. We had an update about a year and a half ago, I think, and I think that really is something that we need to look at, because that is something that should change the metrics of what we're studying.
Okay, good point.
That's it.
Anybody else? Ann?
You didn't ask for something fun. I know you all love coming to Millbrae, but if you want to come another time, on August 17th, we have our Millbrae Lions Car Show. It's one of the biggest car shows in the Bay Area. And on Labor Day, we have the Art and Wine Festival, and I hope you will all consider coming to Millbrae. And I'm enjoying it. And tomorrow, we have the second of our Beats and Brews Music Festival. We're trying to bring some gaiety back to Millbrae. It'll be right down here at Broadway. We shut the street down for a couple of hours, live music and food, and I hope you will consider joining us. It's a shame it wasn't tonight. We could have skipped out early.
Okay, all right. If nothing else, I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I'll do that.
Aye, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. This is a marathon.
You and 4,000 other